invocation or names granted for the pledge to the flag. Father, again, we ask for your wisdom and your guidance in all things that we consider this evening as this board. May everything that is presented to us this evening be that with a good and open, honest heart, and be received in the same manner. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Be seated, please. All right. First item, consideration of a resolution to approve the agenda. No changes or corrections.
Yeah, it's just a facts over, I guess. Under the 16th agreement, they talk about 119, and they'll speak about 199 instead of 119.
All right, we'll consider that as a typo, it should be 119. Any other corrections to the agenda?
Under number 16, new business, they talk about 119 in the direct department, and you got 199 instead of 119.
That's not it. It's not on the agenda.
It's not on the agenda, it's in the writing.
Not correction in the agenda.
Anything else?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion.
I'll second.
And a second. All in favor?
Uh,
Any opposed? So carried. Staff, can let the record show that Commissioner Mason is absent. All right, next item, consideration to approve the minutes of the November 4th, 2014 Commission meeting and the minutes of the Recreation Master Plan Workshop. No corrections or additions, I'll entertain a motion.
With no corrections or additions being mentioned, I make a motion that we approve as given.
second.
Motion and a second to approve as written. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. As I ask that public comments please be limited to agenda items only. And it should be noted that documents from this meeting, as are all meetings, are located in the clerk's office and on the Board of Commissioners website. We have an appearance scheduled for 5:30, so we will take that up at that time. Under old business, we have one item, consideration of an agreement for the use of Effingham County prison inmates in the city of Bloomingdale, previously tabled from 11/4.
This agreement is largely unchanged. The attorney took another stab at the changing the liability language, which is a new paragraph, item number 6. The rest of the agreement is unchanged. This is for an as-needed agreement with the city of Bloomingdale.
The concern was to release us with liability.
That's correct.
Address.
And the new number 6 says the city of Bloomingdale releases and covenants not to sue Effingham County, its elected officials, officers, employees hereinafter as releasees, and from any and all claims, demands, or causes of action for damage or injury to property, employees, and agents arising from this agreement, except for injury or property damage resulting from Effingham County's willful act or omissions. Further, the city of Bloomingdale agrees to indemnify and save and hold harmless from any loss, liability, damage, or cost it may occur arising from the agreement, except for the damage or injury to persons or property resulting from Effingham County's willful act or omission.
That was the only issue found with it.
I like the way that reads a lot better than previous number 6. To my knowledge, that was the only thing that we still got the out. If I noticed. contract as amended. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. First item, new business. Consideration to approve a request for interest on refunds of water and sewer impact fees collected prior to the issuance of a building permit.
I need to recuse myself on this.
Let the record show.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This item has been before you several times before regarding interest to be paid on impact fees that were paid or prepaid. And in the past two requests, the board has denied that. However, I did call and inform the Simons of that, and I believe they asked to appear before you. And so with that, I think they need to be able to speak before this board.
Okay.
Okay?
Now, it's my understanding that these fees were collected at the time of closing, am I correct? And were paid to the county.
They were collected,
And that we've refunded those fees. Am I correct up to date?
they were collected in error, and yes, they were refunded.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Ms. Simon, if you could pull the mic closer to you and state your name, please. Thank you.
Marianne Simon. I have a copy of the Effingham County, Georgia Development Impact Ordinance, and that has been my reference for my request for reimbursement of interest. And in section 11, miscellaneous provisions, which is on page 19, paragraph number 5, it states, if development fees are calculated and paid based on a mistake or a misrepresentation, they'll be recalculated within 90 days of the issue being raised. Any amounts overpaid by a fee payer shall be refunded by the county within 30 days after the county's acceptance of the recalculated amount, with interest at the rate of 3% per annum since the date of such overpayment. And at the time we picked up the check from Mr. Barnes, we made an inquiry as to interest and why it wasn't being paid. At that time, he said he would look into it. And so we waited about a week, and when we didn't hear from him, we contacted the finance department and were told that it wasn't going to be paid. So we sent a letter, registered, inquiring and citing the state code and also the county code, which both, they're similar, if not exactly the same, stating 3% interest should be paid on funds collected in error. And once we sent the letter, we still heard from no one. And at that point, the finance department contacted us and told us that the county attorney, Mr. Gottwald, had decided that there would be no interest paid. And we asked how he came to that decision. She didn't know. And that's when we decided to ask that we be put on your agenda. So basically, we're here asking just for an explanation of how it was determined that we were not entitled to interest on funds that were held for 7.5 years in error by the county.
All right. These fees were paid at the time of closing, correct?
Correct.
Did the county ever ask for those funds?
Did the county ask for them?
Yeah.
Well, indirectly, they, when you have the, I can look at the form here, the closing papers of the documents.
What I'm trying to determine is, did the county collect these in error, or were they funds that were given to the county in error? To me, there's a difference. Now, I'll have to ask.
Well, from my point, I'm sorry, from my point of view, they were collected in error. What, from the other side, I'm not sure how you view it.
I can tell you from personal experience, that I have paid municipalities money in error, and when I asked for it back and I received it, you know, money gets put into an account, and I'm just trying to figure out if the county ever asked for this money,
Well, by law,
or if the county collected it.
by law, it's put into an account that collects interest. So whatever account it was put into when it was collected, and I'm trying to look at my closing documents to see exactly what it said in terms of the fees that were collected. But as part of the closing, obviously, they had to be paid. So between the developer and the county, I'm assuming the developer is in compliance with the county's laws and codes, which, if we read more out of your ordinance, probably determines why the developer collected those funds. I'm pretty sure it addresses it in there.
All right. Am I correct that at the time this was brought to the county's attention, the funds were asked to be refunded?
At the time it was brought to the county's attention? No, at the time it was brought to our attention. We have no idea when it was brought to the county's attention. How would we know?
No, I'm saying that it was brought to this board's attention and the board voted to refund the money when we were asked to. Is that correct?
I have no idea. From where we are, we don't know what the board did. We just know that there was an article in the paper saying 4 people were going to get refunds and that there would probably be more to follow. That was in the Effingham Herald in November of 2013. But when it was determined, we have no way of knowing. That's just when we saw the article.
So have you gotten your money back?
Yes,
Okay.
that we've gotten the $4,500 impact fee back.
And how did you go about getting that back?
When we saw the article, we contacted the finance department, asked them if we were.
Okay.
They didn't contact us
Okay. But when you asked for the money back, it was refunded?
within a month.
Okay. Just trying to get the facts. Anyone else have something else to add?
I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't say something. Excuse me.
Oops, sorry.
Clear up. Vera Jones. In this capacity, just to clear up a little bit of some of the questions that were asked or misinformation that's been in the press and other things. The Simons signed a purchase agreement to buy lots in South Effingham Plantation. And the county had drafted water and sewer agreements and presented them to the developers in order to provide their water and sewer and obtain their GFO loans. In those contracts, they required us to guarantee each year a certain amount of money in those impact fees, whether building permits had been purchased or not. And there's been case law since then that has proven that that was not correct. I recently just saw something in the newspaper where a commissioner quoted, the Joneses were the only ones that collected this at closing, and that is right. We did that in an attempt to honor our word and our contract and look out for the taxpaying citizens of Effingham County and ourselves, all parties. And to the extent that if the county, in my opinion on that, to the extent that the county should not have received that money or didn't ask them directly for it, they could have put it in an escrow account or mailed it back. But at some point when they receive it, what do they think they're receiving it for? Like, there has to be a checks and balances on that end. So there's some question on that. But I'm not here to advocate whether interest is due or not. I just wanted to clarify those questions about those things that's been said.
And you are speaking now in your capacity as part of D.M. Jones Construction.
That's right.
Who was the seller of this land
Yes.
to these individuals.
Again, short version is the county drafted a contract that they provided to us, asking us to guarantee impact fees prior to building permit, whether building permits were sold or not. The only protectionary way we knew to do that, the best case would be to get the purchasers to agree to pay the fees. The money was never made out to us at closing. The checks were made directly to the county, so it was not paid to us. I've also seen that in the paper. And the county accepted it and kept it and eventually refunded it upon request.
Now, the contract between D.M. Jones, the developer that sold this property, and the county, that required DM Jones to pay so much money each year.
To guarantee
To
a certain
guarantee.
amount every year, whether permits were paid or not. And a valid point you would be bringing is, a question mark of that contract between us. So then if they want, their contract was with the developer, so if they wanted to come to the developer and say, hey, but I didn't actually collect the money didn't flow through me.
I understand.
So and I did that to try to be sure the county was protected in that way. And I really did assume, actually, that it was going into an escrow account. That's what I would have assumed, but I surely wasn't checking on that at that point. That's the crust of where we are.
But the contract with the county did not require you to collect these funds from the time that,
No,
okay,
it just required me to guarantee it.
okay.
Yeah.
Just one clarify.
So, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the settlement statement here, and on the settlement statement, it's listed as water and sewer tap fee to Effingham County for $4,500. So whatever your arrangement was with with DM Jones, it almost feels irrelevant to us because, we paid fees as part of our closing. You've reimbursed the fees, which led us to believe you had them in escrow somewhere. And unless you didn't have the funds since 2006 when we purchased the lot, I don't know who else would be responsible for the interest.
At the time that you purchased the lot, was it your intent to build a house on it?
Yes.
So how would the county know that you weren't just simply going in and paying that fee in anticipation of getting the permit?
Well, obviously, as part of the settlement, you don't have a choice we didn't have a choice to wait until we were ready to build. It was part of the transaction of the sale of the lot. And I'm sure it would have been better for us to sit on our $4,500 even a CD would have paid us something, but it wasn't an option.
I'm not trying to be argumentative, I'm just trying to figure out who required and if you were refunded the money when you asked for it. I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, when we became aware that others were getting refunds, we felt we had nothing to lose by asking. So we asked, and we got it.
Did you also ask for the interest when you asked for the funds back, the $4,500?
Well, I know we had conversations with Mr. Barnes about it, but beyond that, I don't know if there's anything more official than
I
that.
never heard anything about it.
You don't remember, you didn't hear anything about it?
About you wanted the interest on the $4,500 that you paid.
Trying to remember what was discussed when we originally approved the refund, which I was very much pushing that we need to get that straight. I'm pretty sure during that discussion, we discussed the interest and there was, I'm not sure if it was part of the motion when we approved it. Do you anybody remember?
Yes, sir. Let me clarify a couple of things. When this was originally done, Simons did contact us. It was during that time that the board was already making a decision as to whether to refund these or not. When our attorney, Eric, looked at the ordinance section, there's a particular ordinance section 11.5. It was his review of that he believed that particular ordinance section that they're citing did not contemplate this particular issue, that they weren't necessarily paid in error to us, nor did we make an error in the collection of them. And therefore, the interest did not apply. The Simons contacted us. We had been going through this with the board. We requested to make payment from the board. When we received that, we actually refunded that. And with the guidance from the attorney, have brought this back before the board on 2 different occasions, both in receiving requests from Mr. and Mrs. Simons. The first one verbally, which we brought back before you some time ago, and again this past year that we brought this before you. Each time we contacted them and gave them the decision of the board and cited that the attorney in this particular case did not believe that particular section of the ordinance complied or was applicable to us paying that interest. when I informed Simons this last time, based off of the decision that the board made, I contacted them again and they asked, to appear before you themselves. And so that's why they're here. And yes, this has been addressed on 2 other occasions.
Chairman, I feel like I have one more relevant point to make, just so it can be in everybody's thinking process. Vera Jones. In a little bit of a separate factor, but it could be the same scenario that you'd have to consider as far as the fact that their contract is with the developer and then the developer's contract is with you. We made the same choice about running the county's water and sewer when the county failed to do that, so that we would not be in the legal situation of all of these people having to sue us for the county's lack of performing to us. So they would have had to sue us, and then we would have had to sue the county. And in my opinion, it was best all the way around that the county didn't receive that type of lawsuit, nor did we. So we performed the county's task at that time also. And so this is that same type of scenario, in my opinion. We were trying to avoid all that, but if the answer to them is you got to sue DM Jones, then that does put DM Jones in the position of then they have to come back towards the county.
I think Elizabeth may shed some light on the legal aspects of what we as staff were
Well, when you look at the
given as
ordinance,
guidance.
I agree with Eric's assessment. The ordinance contemplates an overpayment and underpayment of fees. In this scenario, and I'm assuming the house was eventually built on the lot, it's not still an empty lot.
It is an empty lot.
It's still an empty lot. Okay. The county accepted a prepayment of funds that would have been due at the time of the issuance of the building permit. The Simons have what's called privity of contract with the developer, not with the county. And I fully understand DM Jones's reasoning for doing things the way they did and commend them for ensuring that the county got their money. But the county did not require the Simons to make the payment at the time of closing. That was a requirement put on them by the developer. So the county did not cause them to make the overpayment.
If I may, after we paid our $4,500 to DM Jones, if they had held it for 7.5 years, believe me, we would be asking them for the interest. But it's my understanding that the county held it, and that is why the county paid us back $4,500 minus the interest. So I would agree with what you're saying if the county hadn't stepped up and assumed some responsibility for those funds.
Well, we refunded them when it was brought to our attention that there was never a permit issued. The
Right.
money was asked for.
Right. I understand that. But obviously, until it was published in the paper that there was an issue with the impact fee, we didn't think we were entitled to it, right? So if there are persons who own lots in South Effingham Plantation right now who didn't read Effingham Herald, you may still have their funds, which really is irrelevant to what we're doing here. So if you don't know, you can't ask,
I understand.
Like I say, I think if any of you were in our position, you would be thinking it's reasonable also that if someone sat on $4,500 of your dollars, you could have offered it back. I don't know when along the way. If you didn't know until that newspaper article came out, I guess I accept that, but that wasn't our choice to let you keep it for 7.5 years.
I think the newspaper article, and I'd have to look, was written as a result of somebody asking for the fees to be refunded. They brought it to the board and said, these permits were never issued, we want our money back. And I think the first case was somebody that owned 2 lots, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm looking at Ms. Jones and she's nodding her head.
Well,
So
I'd like,
I think I remember the party that started it.
well,
And that day, we gave direction as a board, and I think this will bear out in the minutes, that to refund that money, and anyone else that we found had the money, we should take action to
Right.
refund that under the sun.
so if you didn't ask you didn't get it back. And that's why I'm asking for the interest. I don't want to be the person who doesn't say, oh, and by the way, I'd like my 7.5 years worth of 3% per annum interest because I didn't ask. You know? So that's why I'm here.
I'm pretty sure that was discussed in our first.
It was,
approval.
and based on the attorney's recommendation, I think this board took the action to refund the principal amount only and no interest.
Right, well, you can see in the ordinance, I mean, it obviously can't address every circumstance. However, it actually has the words mistake or misrepresentation. And you don't agree that this was a mistake, regardless of whose mistake it was. And I don't know what else you could call it. I mean, what else could it say in there that would, you know, be a reasonable wording for you to give that money back? I mean, it has to.
The sign was clear, but that's the reason we include the attorneys to clarify these things.
Yeah, I understand.
All right, anyone else got anything else to say on this matter?
I just want to add, if we had known you were discussing this in September, we would have come, but we didn't know it was on the agenda. You know, I mean, I don't really feel great about you guys having to keep going over this. But I wasn't invited last time, I didn't know last time. And even in spite of our phone calls, no one said, well, we're going to take this up and stay tuned, you know? So you're just sitting there not hearing anything, wondering what's happening with the county.
Regardless of whatever action this board takes this evening, we're sorry that you had to take your time to come out and bring it up again.
Okay. All right, well.
All right. Anyone else? Do I have a motion from this board?
Make a motion to approve order number 3, do not refund the interest on the water and sewer impact fees.
Based on our attorney's input, I'll have to second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. So your answer is
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
all right, the time is 5:30. Scheduled by the Jackson family. We have 15 minutes allocated for your presentation.
Excuse me, Chairman, in the letter that I sent last week to Mr. Kovac and to Ms. I'm sorry, Craig Bennell, Your Honor, Chairman. I'm an attorney here in Effingham County. In the letter that I sent last week to Mr. Kovac and to Ms. Johnson, which I assume was transmitted to the members of the commission, I mentioned that I would distribute copies of the deeds and maps that were mentioned therein. And with your permission, I'd like to approach to
Please,
that.
This is the letter dated November 11th that
Yes.
you're referring to. We all have that. In fact, I was kind of looking forward to this handwritten deed.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, thank you for agreeing to give the Jackson family an audience here this evening. As I mentioned in that letter of November 11th, We understand that this is certainly an extra legal or non-legal forum, and the Jackson family wishes to express its gratitude for you all simply hearing them out on this issue. As you all probably know, there was a quiet title action brought by the county in 1994 that dealt with the ownership of 200 acres more or less near the intersection of Highway 119 and Highway 21. I want to be brief in my presentation because Mr. Jackson and Mr. Holmes, who are also here, Glover Jackson and Leroy Holmes, would also like to speak briefly to the commission. As I pointed out in the letter of November 11th, the dispute over this land dealt with the ownership of these 200 acres more or less. At the time of the quiet title action, which was decided in the county's favor. I want to make that clear and make it understood that we're not here to ask the county ask the county commission to address in some way the result of that quiet title action. If that is the step that must be taken from here forward, then the Jackson family is I think prepared to go ahead and attempt to do so. At any rate, as my letter of November 11th points out, the Jackson family's dispute basically boils down to two contentions, one of which is that the county claimed to own 70 acres more or less near that of that disputed 209 acres back in 1994 at the time of the quiet title action. In 2008, the county gave the Jackson family the authority to enter onto county land in order to survey that property. In connection with that survey and title searches that were done, the Jackson family learned that the 70 acres that the county claimed to own at the time of the quiet title action, it could not in fact have owned. It claimed to have acquired that property from the Butler family, and Effingham County real property records demonstrate that the Butler family didn't own 70 acres there to convey to the county. In addition, as you can see, the Jackson family's claim comes originally from a handwritten deed in 1915 that describes 4 acres more or less, and then goes on to describe the property boundaries of that conveyance. When you look at the boundaries, when you look at the property that constituted the boundaries of that 4 acres more or less, and the deed that the map that I have attached to those deeds is a map that references where those property boundaries lie. You can see it's significantly more than 4 acres that was attempted to have been conveyed by that original handwritten deed. In fact, it is, the Jackson family contends, the 209 acres that was in dispute back at the time of the quiet title action. With that introduction, I'd like to introduce to the commission Mr. Glover Jackson, and I'd ask Mr. Jackson to explain to the commission the steps that the Jackson family has taken throughout this 20 years since the quiet title action and what brings it here this evening.
Before that, if I may ask you one question.
Yes, sir.
Maybe two.
Yes, sir.
It's my understanding, and this was before my time here.
Mine as well, sir.
There was a special master that was appointed for this action.
Yes, sir.
And is this the same documents that was presented at that time, that was reviewed at that time? Or is this new documentation that should be considered, and that be considered in some new light?
Mr. Kessler, that quiet title action was well before my time as well, but I think Mr. Jackson and Mr. Holmes, who were parties in that lawsuit, can answer that question specifically.
Okay.
Okay, my name is Glover Jackson Sr. Okay, your question was, how you doing? Wendell?
How are you doing?
Doing pretty good.
We had a conversation on the phone.
Yeah, but we never got together.
Remembered that we went to school together.
Yeah, we did. A long
We were both
time.
a little younger.
Yes. Your question was, okay, the choir can sue in '94. First of all, let me say this. Take it way back how we grieve and how we got this far. Back in when I was an early child, I'm not going to entertain you. I just want to tell you a little bit about history. That's all right.
Yes, sir.
Well, back in '94, when I was a child, my father, he had a lot of kids, 14 of us. He had so many kids, I thought, the old lady living in the shoe, I thought that we was famous, thought that was, they were talking about us.
Now, your father was Freddie Jackson, is that correct?
Yes, my father was Freddie Jackson.
Okay. Just want to be sure I've got the names.
Right. But the saddest thing was when I came around the corner one day and see my father crying on the doorstep. And I didn't let him see me, so I asked my mama what's going on. My father said he was crying because the county took all his land. That was a sad thing. My dad had bought land because he had 14 head of kids, and he went out and bought a huge tract of land so he could give to all his kids. The thing was that when the county took possession of our land, that's land that we could have developed on, you know what I'm saying? We could have had buildings out there. We could have made money off the land, but still we don't make nothing. Anyhow, in 1994, we went through a lawsuit, but I was betrayed by my own lawyer in '94 because he had the opportunity to go out there and survey the land and everything. He was supposed to survey the land, question the boundaries and everything before we went to court. But my lawyer didn't present me as he should have. He knew that we owned the land. So therefore we went to court barehanded. Okay. Sit there. Stay there. Well, anyhow, can you excuse us for a minute?
Sure.
1 minute. Go on. Yeah. So we Jackson, we fought for the land very delicately. Up to this time here, this caused us a lot of pain, caused us a lot of emotions. It hurt us physical and mentally. But all we asking now is try to get this straight. You know what I'm saying? Let's bring this to a closure once and for all. In the Bible say forget about that. But I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but we've been fighting this thing for about 40 years now. Our whole inheritance, and we are not about to give up. We're going to keep on fighting because this was daddy's inheritance, our inheritance from our father. We need to keep on, or we're not going to give up. I don't know if I asked the question that you asked me, but we're here tonight, me and my family. It's almost begging. Let's bring this to a close. The county law say that, and we do believe, if you build anything on a person's land, and they can prove that this land, everything on that land belongs to the person. And also, Exodus, the 20th chapter, 17 says, thou shalt not cover thy neighbor, not his maid service, not his man service, not his ox, not his ass, and everything belongs to thee. To me, this one of God's great commandments has been broke. And we, the Jackson family, is pleading some kind of way, let's bring this to a close. Let's bring this to a close. 40 years of fighting has been long enough. Some kind of way, as a Christian way, let's see if can we bring this to a close.
Mr. Jackson, I would have to ask you a question or two. Number one, I don't think that this board can sit here in a short period of time and review all this information and make a reasonable decision as to whether this needs to go forward or not. So I don't think that's going to happen tonight. But you're talking about the property upon which the hospital sits?
Yes.
Upon which the EMC services sit?
Yes.
The Gateway building sits?
Yes.
The parking area that the hospital uses?
Yes.
And you're asking to bring this to a close, and it was my understanding, except for the fact of the signs that your family placed on your property, which you have the legal right to do, that the county stole your property. And I understand that. But we thought this had gone through the courts, or it was my understanding this has gone through the courts, it had come to a closure. So you saying now bring it to a close, what in your opinion would bring this to a close?
What the law say, once a person took a person's land, if the person could prove that he took the land, then it become a crime. So we went through all these years, all this time. Last thing we talked to the county told to do, said we knew we got possession of your land. But if y'all could just prove it, you could prove it, we got your land.
Somebody from the county said
Yes.
that they used?
Yes, Ellen Zipper was the county administrator at the county.
Okay.
Right. So we went through all these years, spent all this money just to prove the county that the land belongs to us. You know, once you think you know something, it hurts. But once you know something.
But you made a statement a little while ago that if somebody puts a building on somebody else's land, that building becomes theirs.
That's the law.
I'm asking you a question, sir. Are you saying that you want to take possession of the hospital?
No, sir. I don't want to take possession of the hospital.
Then please answer my question and tell me, in your opinion, what would bring this to a close?
Well, if we could get some kind of compensation.
And what would that compensation be, sir? For us to buy another piece of property that size, and do you want another piece of property, this many acres? I mean, what would it take to bring this to a close in your mind?
We are not asking for the land back. We cannot get the land back. But the county have used the land for about 80 years. So, therefore, you use the land for 80 years. And we have not was able to use none of the land. So therefore, once you use the land that long, I feel for the Jackson that we should be some kind of way compensated.
And I'm asking you, what would bring this to a close?
He's asking what compensation are you requesting?
You talking about money?
That's why I'm asking you,
Right.
sir.
Right.
Is it more land?
No, don't want no more
Is it
land.
money in
We
your
need to be
pocket?
paid, compensate for the land. We need to be paid.
Can I ask, do you mind if I ask your attorney a couple of questions?
Go ahead, ma'am.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Have you all made a determination as to what you're requesting? I think that's one of the things. And something I wanted to understand from your perspective as representing them, the Jackson family, is that the court case that did happen in 1994. In your understanding, that is not valid, why?
Let me answer the questions in order, if I may. The first is, no, the Jackson family hasn't sat down and determined a figure that it thinks would be fair compensation. And the second question, I'm sorry, but I think you asked me if on what basis I determined that that 94 quiet title action was not valid. Is that what?
And I don't know if I posed it properly. I'm not an attorney, but I'm just trying to understand from your perspective. Yeah, why should we be taking this up after that legal action?
Okay. I think, let me address the validity of the quiet title action, if I may. The opportunities for the Jackson family to, I mean, obviously this action was 20 years ago. The time to appeal this action has long passed.
Right, that's why I'm asking this question.
The opportunities for the Jackson family to set aside that decision are very, I'm sorry?
Minuscule.
Yeah, are slim. Essentially, the Jackson family would have to establish that there was a fraud that was perpetrated. The Jackson family has, through their efforts, and I think, Mr. Chairman, this may respond to the initial question that you had asked. I think that the Jackson family has pretty well established through their efforts since 2008, when they were permitted to survey this property and did title searches on some of the properties in the disputed area. I think that the Jackson family can establish that the county's claim to that property going back to the time of the quiet title action is questionable. Now, does that constitute a fraud that would permit the Jackson family to set aside the 1994 quiet title action? I can't answer that.
That's the beauty of the law. Nobody ever knows.
Indeed.
Somebody figures that.
Until somebody presents that issue to the Superior Court or the Court of Appeals, I honestly can't answer it yes or no.
Have you had discussions with the Jackson family if indeed what he has presented tonight is correct about the possibility of them taking some type of action against their first attorney?
It was 20 years ago.
It is for us as well, so that's what I'm asking.
I understand that, and the time in which they could have taken action against their attorney has long passed.
But what brings us here today is you know, it was asked if y'all could petition this board. The first response was, no, it serves no purpose. I get a phone call from Mr. Jackson, and we agreed to listen to whatever it is you got to say. Now, we need to have something to compel us to even want to look at this thing. Now, the fact is, the Jacksons are citizens of this county, and I feel like every citizen should be treated equal. So I'm asking again, what is it in their mind that would make this be resolved? Because we need to know, or I need to know, whether or not we need to delve into this thing to see if there's any basis for opening this thing up again.
And I think if you're saying they have not determined that, I see that it's a large family. There are several people that probably have to talk themselves just as we have to study this information. So I think we understand that you may not be able to answer that tonight.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think the reason that the family hasn't determined a number, let's say, that they think would be appropriate is because, and I don't know if one of us or the other is putting the cart before the horse, but I think that before they could even consider among themselves a number, they would want to know that the county is serious about entertaining in this forum a claim.
Well, the fact of the matter, and I may be totally off base, but Freddie Jackson did in fact sell some piece of property to the county, correct?
Yes, we sold a piece of property.
He sold a piece of property for an amount.
It was about,
At value those many years ago.
no, it was on the wide of the road, 3rd Street. That's the only property we sold to the county. It was the wide of the road in 3rd Street. That's the only property we sold to the county.
This is an appearance for y'all to present whatever you've got to present. I will tell you, I will look at this. If I think there is a reason to open this thing up, I will entertain asking this board to do so. I can't do it on my own. But I need some type of compelling information, and I need to know where we're headed. If I was to say, okay, board, I want y'all to look at this thing, I want to get an attorney involved, I think that a mistake was made. What's it going to cost this county? Are we talking about value back then? The difference between 4 acres and 200 acres or whatever, or 70 acres? Or are we talking about value today? If there was a mistake made, it was made way back then. And I can't see how it would be fair to think that that mistake would transfer to today's values. And that's why I'm asking you, do you want the hospital that's built on this piece of property? In my right mind, for the good of all citizens of this county, I don't think I would have enough compelling information to make the citizens of this county have to give up their hospital. When a judge and a court has already ruled on this. So that's what I'm asking you. Give me something. Give me some parameters.
Excuse me, sir, with all due respect. Just trying to ask.
And your name, sir?
My name is actually Thomas Pinckney, but my mother and my Uncle Glover are brother and sister, so I'm Jackson also. Thomas Pinckney, yes, sir.
Nice to meet you, sir.
May I speak, sir?
Yeah.
Okay. The question as far as the quiet action title. Now, I'm humble enough to be corrected if I'm wrong, but I need to ask this question. With that suit being against the Jacksons back then was about a different piece of property, would that still make it valid for that suit to fit us? You see what I'm saying?
That's the point of law that I couldn't answer.
Okay. Now, that would be one question I'd like to raise.
But that's what I'm looking for.
Right.
Give me information.
Right. Now, the property that the county is claiming is a whole different piece of property in a different district. Okay? That is from, I've been educated by my uncles, and like I said, I'm humble enough to be corrected if wrong. But the property that the county uses as their deed is a different piece of property. When we had our land surveyed, it actually shows all of the boundary lines that we claim, and we have a lot of different things, as in the hospital and the prison camp, the water towers, all of these different things that are sitting on this land. Now, so those things are things that need to be considered. Now, as far as compensation, we are looking for financial compensation to be given back the land. We know that we have different things there that's being used by the county. That's not what we want. We do want financial compensation. If I had to present a dollar amount to the county, it would be nothing less than $65 million. Okay, it would be nothing less than that. But you know, but that's okay. But now that would be just the beginning, because it's worth a lot more than that. A lot more than that when you consider the things that are on the land.
All right.
So I'm probably cutting myself short to say that.
Well, one point I want to make real quick back to you guys is, first and foremost, as one representative representing one district, I can say that I have very strong belief about personal property rights, and that government should never take anyone's property without just compensation, period. But one thing that you're asking of us, oftentimes the law is black and white, oftentimes things are ambiguous and unaddressed. And this is a situation where we're being asked to go back to 1994 and even again 1915. So there's a lot of things in there that take a lot of researching and studying and not being sure of. And I think so one of the reasons for clarification is when you're trying to understand, can we make something right for somebody if there was an issue? Part of that is, can we even do it financially? Is it possible? What can we do if there was a problem? And can we really prove, what if it's unclear, but it seems like, then would we want to, for the benefit of the doubt sake, to be sure that they had not been harmed, but can we give them $65 million? That's how the factors in there about getting down to what the harm is, proving there was harm and what it is, that what the chairman's asking for. But I do know that tonight we won't be able to resolve.
So, but we would be safe to say that it would be considered. You know, now with this number that I'm throwing at you, of course we would have to go back to the family and say, okay, is this the amount, or am I cutting myself short or cutting us short? But now what we'd like to know is if the county is, are you guys taking us seriously, and will you consider, settling with us without any court cases or however? Or will you guys take us serious? That's the question. Will you guys take a serious look at this?
I believe the chairman answered that he'd be willing to look at anything that you can provide evidence-wise. And I believe everyone on the board, if anybody feels differently, please speak forward. But I believe every one of us are open-minded enough to take a look at the facts. And if we believe the citizen's been done wrong, try to make that right. I believe that, period.
Yes.
That was my statement.
Yes.
One question I had, because I know the word, fraudulently taken, I don't know the legal description of fraudulent, but was there alleged acts that were historically taken place? I mean,
Well, if I may ask, and we do have our attorney here. Was there an effort, sir, at the complete question?
At one point, was there a concerted, some kind of fraudulent effort to take the land?
Yes.
No, I wasn't here. So
Yes. I'd say the fraudulent act that we're speaking of is the land itself. In how they arrived at the suit. This I believe that everything is actually irrelevant, so to speak, because the land that we were even speaking of, or with the county, we were speaking of our land. The county, they were showing a whole different piece of property, but we didn't have that knowledge then.
I would like to delve into the details. Otherwise.
Okay, and Matt, and just in my education here, speaking of the same property, using different. If you looked at both of these, it doesn't add up. But per the permission that we got, of course, to go and survey the land, as you would see, all of our boundaries line up. Everything lines up. And we have you know, all the proof that we need that it belongs to us. And I hope I answered your question.
All right. Mr. Pinckney, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Bonnell,
Yes, sir.
do any of y'all have any other relevant documents or information? We've exceeded the time that we had set aside for this by about 20 minutes now, so
In-
I want to be sure that we have everything. Did Mr. Holmes have something else he was going to tell us that he left?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, the Jackson family has put together an entire, a notebook several inches thick of documents, most of which are copies of documents from the Effingham County real property records that demonstrate the claims that are made in the letter of my letter of November 11th. And I'd like to have an opportunity to present that to you.
I will make this promise to you, sir. If you would make me copies and present me with all of that information, get it to me. I will review it and consult with our legal department. And I will have a discussion later with this board, and by February, I have not been promised by December or January.
I understand.
But by February, if you will go ahead and in a timely manner present that to me, I will be happy to look at it and make a decision whether or not to present it to this board for action.
I mean, my recommendation is be there in their best interest if you did an outline.
And I will do that.
Yes. I mean, they put all this time and energy into what they're wanting us to consider. Give it to us. I mean, so that we can have the same benefit of that information.
I'll prepare that and deliver it to you within the next 10 days, Mr. Chairman.
Elizabeth, can I do that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if there's any new information that the board would like to present to us or that the Jackson family has to present, we will take a look at it and determine what, if any, legal requirements the board has.
All right.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you.
Thank you. Let's
Good
go.
to see you, bud. All right. Let's take a 10-minute break. Come back in here at 6:15, please. All right. Let's do this thing. Yeah, we'll get on the train. All right. Next item, new business. Consideration to approve the job description for an activities coordinator for senior citizens.
Good evening.
Good evening.
A little bit different track here.
I'm
This
giving you a chance to wake up.
Yes, I'm here. I'm not coughing either, amazing. This is the approval for the job description for the activities coordinator for the senior center. During the budget preparation for this year, the senior center director did present, and this was approved in the budget, that they were going to switch the part-time nutrition aide position into actually an activities coordinator position. And this did not change the budget of the overall center. However, it will help them apply a little bit more into the activities that the senior citizens have, and we already do have a person with a nutrition aid background. This is just a submission of the activities coordinator job description to be added. It meets all FLSA requirements and the ADA requirements, and I do need approval by the board for the position to be added into the job descriptions for Effingham County before it can be advertised.
So we're not adding another position, it's just kind of broadening the scope of an existing position?
Yes, what we did was it's broadening what we can offer. We were basically, we were going to have a person with a nutrition aid background, and this was approved in the budget. The senior center director did present, and this was approved in the budget, that they were going to switch the part-time nutrition aide position into an activities coordinator position. And I do need approval by the board for the position to be added into the job descriptions for Effingham County before it can be advertised. So we're not adding another position, it's just kind of broadening the scope of an existing position?
Yes.
Yes, what we did was giving our efficiencies a little bit because we already have a person who works with the nutrition aid piece and is able to give us the activities coordinator. So it's the same amount of positions, actually same pricing even for the personnel, but it is just a different title.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss something. That's the way I understood it. Any questions? Motion?
Make a motion that we approve.
Approve alternative number 1, approve it.
Motion and a second to approve alternative number 1. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. Next item, consideration to approve a pay grade change for the civil engineer position.
A few months ago, we did a approval of the civil engineer grade 3 position. Originally, in our job descriptions and in our budget, we had an engineering tech position. And with the approval, we did keep the pay grade the same, knowing that it may or may not work for us. We have advertised for this position, and it is 10% of market share, which we knew. But we did try, and the response to the position has been very limited, and the new proposed grade change is actually moving from grade 37 to grade 39, from 2143 to 2362.
Can you tell me where we advertised?
Indeed.com, CareerBuilder.com, Monster.com, NeoGov, all the state sites, the coastal, the new Creative Coast of Georgia, which is a little bit different.
When you say something like all state sites, what does that mean? All state sites?
We have a portal that puts it onto the governmental sites for us. So you basically enter once and then they release it out. Does that make sense?
I'm trying to figure out if it's getting to people that are engineers. I guess I'm trying to figure out how targeted that we're, and the bottom line of it is, do you have any other ideas about other places that we should, I know that the money's one thing that we're talking about, but also at the same time, if we make that change or whatever, can we still, are there some other places that we should get it word out to?
There are some other places that we can use. They are all have a cost, and we generally use all the sites that are provided to us for free, or we use trial periods in which to do it, which are all usually over 30 days. Your groups that use engineering, we did use some of their sites as well. We did not get a humongously great response from there, so.
Bottom line, Toss, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
If you were looking for a job, you were looking for this job, where would you be looking?
I don't know the answer to that. That's a great question. I have spoken with some other people that run engineering firms around here locally as well. They all tell me they're looking the same as I am, and they can't find anyone out.
Okay.
I tend to think that just when people were shed from the market several years ago, they went somewhere. They're not just, they either found a new occupation, they moved, something happened. In fact, one of them, the comment he made to me was, I've hired a headhunter the first time in my entire life to try to go find somebody. So I don't know that it's simply us having this issue. It appears to be tough right now. Things are picking back up. We're competing against these other engineering firms, and apparently they're having issues also.
It may be worthwhile if we end up, if we have a stab at it again with the change or whatever, if we go that direction, that if we try it and don't get a good response, that we get nothing else, do some type of pay in the papers in certain areas, maybe expanding out to the Statesboro or wherever.
We generally, as I said, try to do all of the state of Georgia and the low country of South Carolina and the northern part of Florida when we do post.
But that's all email.
No, it's all, they're on all the sites. Generally, your response out of a newspaper ad, like actually in the paper, people don't look there anymore. And it has just been considered, they're not. I mean, they use the newspapers, I usually back me up. The newspaper has online sites. So 9 times out of 10, it's not a print ad, it's an actually online ad.
Well, all I'm saying is if we increase it and we don't get a response, we gotta try something different.
And we can pay, as that's an option. We can pay for ads. We are not doing that right now. If you'd like to change the staff direction, I'd be happy to research those.
One we knew about it was interested and it was a pay thing. We would otherwise be interested.
Will this get them interested?
I don't know.
Because really, that's what's before this board this evening, is whether to approve this pay grade increase.
We have had,
Mr. Jones' concerns are valid because we, if it's not getting to the people that we need to get to.
I've spoken to one myself, and maybe the same person, I don't know, and he did share with me a number. This won't get him interested. And I'm not suggesting that we need to go up to the number he was asking for either. I'm just, in that particular instance.
This is a starting point, is that correct?
yes, this position does not require PE, and it's actually been advertised as such, but there's so few in the area that are at this level that either they're extremely overqualified for what we're asking, or we just don't have that initial piece.
We knew we were starting low. I had a problem going up. The only thing I was trying to be sure of was that when we do go up, that we hit enough people that we're not here again saying, well, we better go up again, but it's because we haven't, figured it out well. So, I have a problem with increasing it.
Well, I'm confident to ensure you that all the sites that we have used are the most popular sites out there. It's just we don't have any additional paid advertising with it.
I just want to make mention of it, really.
We're trying.
I say that if we don't get any response out of the avenues that we're presently doing in 30 days, we need to start expanding it. But for the matter before this board,
Expand the position or reach?
the reach, where we're advertising it. Or if this board wants to put that as a condition of that and do it now, we can do it then. Either way.
We can give 30 days and see what happens.
I have a problem, if you're ready for a motion.
I'm ready.
Just make a motion to approve alternative number 1.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item, consideration to approve a location agreement with LBK Film Productions LLC for the use of the Truitland Building. It's the same agreement that we talked about before, correct?
Yes, sir, we did talk about that. The use of the agreement is, the term of the agreement is essentially from tomorrow until the 25th of November. The compensation is $100. They'll be using the Truitland Building. They will be taking down a partition wall that is a divider, as well as possibly painting an office. We talked to the building's only human occupant, and they have no problem with the schedule or the painting of the office or the use of the facilities. County attorney reviewed the location agreement, which is we've used for all of our movies in the past.
And the changes that they're making, they're not going to be required to put back the wall.
That's correct.
The wall they take down stays down.
As long as they throw it away.
Gotcha.
As long as they throw it away.
And
Hello.
You are the party wanting to make the film.
Thank you, thank you. My name is Nikki Parente. I'm the production coordinator. I know I'm a new face, Rebecca and Octomad. I can't be here tonight, but if you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And we're really excited to be filming here.
Any questions?
And we got most of our questions answered at the last meeting.
What led you to Effingham for that side? Just curious.
We want to build up Savannah and Effingham County, and I know we're using a property over in Effingham, and so our director has wandered around and found some of these places. And the story is about a rapture, so a lot of the streets are kind of empty, and Springfield is like perfect for a small town, kind of thing. So we love the location.
Any questions? Motion?
Make a motion to approve order number 1, say.
Motion and second to approve. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried.
Thank you, guys.
Start your movie tomorrow, right?
Thank you.
I need to move started.
Next item is consideration to approve to provide notice of intent to levy the millage to Effingham Hospital. Now, if I may, before you get started, you will find this in your packets. The board agreed to the MOU with the hospital on the condition that it was approved by HUD. We have gotten a letter of approval, just so that y'all know that. So that,
So
we're
in
going
other words, there's not a lot that needs to be said.
to, yeah. So based on that MOU,
If everyone, understood the agreement with the hospital then also within that agreement, as far as clarification of the actual contract, allowed us to go ahead and start levying that millage. Therefore, those funds will come directly to us, which has been a problem in the past where they went directly from the tax commissioner's office to the hospital. And that reconciliation process was quite cumbersome.
It's hard for us to get a good understanding of what we're from.
Exactly. And so, as part of that clarification of the agreement, we are to give notice to the hospital of our intent to do that. We do have updated amounts from the hospital where we currently stand, and we have already scheduled to have our first meeting going into December so that we can make sure that reconciliation process is completed within that new clarification.
And I read the letter from HUD, and it said exactly what we discussed, that we were not saying it's a new agreement. We wrote it in a for clarification purposes to address things that have not been addressed, so.
and my only question is, and I don't know if we have an answer to this one, when we go to do a set millage rate for next year, it will not have the millage rate for the hospital.
I asked this question.
So will we have to consider that as a millage increase when we start rolling it into our millage?
We have discussed several different possibilities of how to do that, and I think those discussions are still going on as far as the best way to do that, whether or not we actually set it up as a special fund and levy against a special tax district to do that.
Okay.
Well, I did ask a
Whether or
question.
not we actually pull it in within our general fund and levy it in addition to and on top of our actual levy.
However it's done, we still can show it in a broken down sense so it's understood.
We have discussed those different pieces with the tax commissioner, and she is in the process of giving us all that information so that we can get with the attorneys and clarify with the board exactly the positions that can be done. And we were going to try and bring that to y'all first thing in January.
All right. So the item before us is whether or not to approve, provide notice of intent to levy the millage to the
Yes,
hospital.
with direction from the board that we will make a decision as to how that process and the manner in which to do it coming in January.
Gotcha. Any questions? Motion?
Make a motion that we approve option number 1, giving a notice.
Third. Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So carried. Next item. Presentation of the Effingham County financial statements and auditor's report. What I have been looking forward to since July 1st.
Yes. I think the auditors will agree that it's a quite aggressive schedule. But we are pleased to be before you tonight in order to present the audited financial statements along with the auditor's statements and the findings and any questions you may have of them. Each year, staff tries to get through the financial statements with you so that you have an overview of exactly what has transpired during the year. This is not intended to be all-inclusive. It's simply to give you an overview and to cite certain pieces of information. And as such, we will try to go through it in a uniform manner, but with the understanding that it is summary in nature. The things that we will be looking at tonight are financial statements themselves, the MD&A, which is the management discussion and analysis, the revenues, the expenditures, what we currently have in fund balance, and then more of a graphical representation of those items, and then the actual findings from our auditor and comments from the auditor. The first, and I believe in each one of your packets, you should have a printout of these slides. So if you don't, let me know, but it'll make it easier for you to follow along. In summary form, the first slide that you're looking at is our actual expenditures for this past year. That's our fiscal year running from July through June of 2013. Within our general fund, you'll see that our total expenditures were $27,273,681. That actually was less than we originally budgeted and intended. You will also see the detail of that information on page 20 of your audited financial statements. This particular sheet actually comes from page 18. If you want to make a note of that so you can refer back to it if you're looking through our audited financial statements.
Page 18 or 20?
Page 20 is actually the detail of the general fund, and page 18 is where the summary information comes from. Within our SPLOS, we had 17 million, roughly 17 million worth of disbursements. Most of that, of course, is in our capital outlays, which has to do with our different SPLOS programs, and we'll go through those in a few minutes, along with disbursements to our cities, which was $1,164,939 of that total 17 million. Then we basically group all of our other governmental funds. I shouldn't say all. We group our fire, inspection, senior citizens, those particular funds together. That's what you'll see in other governmental funds. We had disbursements through those of about $7,300,000 for total disbursements throughout the county of $51,600,000. The next slide that you're looking at is the summary of our revenue by fund. You will see that our summary for the general fund, we actually received revenues of $28,000,001. Our special tax district of $3 million, our SPLOS of $8 million, and then of course other governmental funds of about $3 million. Total, we received in about $43,000,001. Of that, several notes. Number one is our sales tax. We did go above our budgeted funds in that, so that was good. Also, too, within our property tax, we actually received more than we originally anticipated. That was primarily due to the title ad valorem tax, and also to receiving prior receipts in from prior years of property tax.
So we spent less than we budgeted, and we brought in more than we budgeted, so we've been doing it conservatively, right?
It depends on how you look at it. We actually increased our budget overall, but those increases primarily had to do with the increases for the sheriff's department, for the cars, and also too for the city's disbursements out of fund balance. You will also see the summary of this information on page 18 of your actual financial statements, along with the detail. If you really want to look at the other governmental funds in detail, you'll see that on page 52 and page 56 as far as the detail of that synopsis. The next slide that we're going through is basically a summary of those pieces. It's the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. This basically is our bottom line, what happened bottom line. Our overall revenues, of course, you looked at just a minute ago, were the $28 million in general fund, $28,000,001, expenditures of $27,200,000. So that net difference of revenue over expenditures was $866,000, along with other financing sources. And other financing sources basically make up, for instance, the income we receive from the property sale of the land, along with, if you recall, we actually did a $750,000 lease. And then we had transfers out that netted out of that, which were about $475,000. If you recall, we actually net out for the 911 service and also to landfill. So net, that was $577,000. That gives us a fund balance change in the general fund of $1,000,004. So that adds to our fund balance. Within our special tax district, as you know, those are the funds that we have that are being received in from the insurance premiums, also too from the PILTs and so forth. along with our franchise income. And then, of course, we disperse that as needed and transfers out to each one of the particular funds, which generally has been, in some aspects, fire, has been water and sewer, and so forth, as the board is directed during our budget process. Within SPLOST, our SPLOST, we actually received about $8.8 million. Our expenditures this past year were $17 million. Some people ask how that is. We, of course, are pulling on cash balances, okay, that we've had sitting there for the different projects that we're doing. And in a few minutes, we'll go through some of those projects so that everyone understands where those SPLOST funds have gone. The net change in that fund balance was $11.5 million. And then if you look at our governmental funds, the net difference was $388. Total, as far as the overall government funds, if you go through each one of those and add those together, was a reduction overall of our fund balance of 9.3.
Excuse me, I want to ask a question. You have 17 million under expenditures there. A lot of that will be old SPLOST.
Some of that will be old SPLOST, and in a few minutes you'll see some slides that actually give you the detail of that. The next slide is simply the summary of that information. One thing I would like to call your attention to is on the general fund, exclusive of those things that are already restricted within our fund balance. We show right now our ending fund balance for the general fund of $12,486,000. When you actually show those things that are restricted out of that, it equals to about $10 million. Some people look at that and they ask, well, why do we need to have that $10 million on hand? If you recall in the past, we've talked about several different things. We talked about the recommendations from the GOFA. We talked about recommendations as far as how much money we hold so that we don't necessarily have to do TANs and so forth. Basically, that cushions us during the time in which we do not have our tax levy in force. So, you know, we're cash flowing from one period into the next period, and that's about 5 months worth. So that's about what we need on hand to be able to cash flow through an entire year. Right now, if you look at our current expenditures, it's about 45% of our overall expenditures. So far, that has went well. This board has, in the past, actually committed $4.2 million to stay there. That's for stabilization to ensure that we can pay our bills. Also, too, for any capital needs that we may need to pay out. And so we basically, at this point, have about 5.8 that's unassigned. In other words, it's not committed. It's not, you know, attributed to some piece of it. And that helps us with our cash flow from month to month.
And that's not showing on the slide.
That's correct.
Okay.
You know, that sounds like an awful lot, but at the same point in time, that's only really 2 months worth of expenditures. So those funds have been allotted by this board, and I think we're at a reasonable level to be able to sustain it.
It's 4.1.
Overall, 4.2 is what you've already committed. You'll see that in your pages on your fund balance. And the unassigned is at 5.9. Within our special tax district, if you look at that, our beginning fund balance was 6.7. The net change for the current year was $364,000, which puts us at about $7 million. We cash flow that so that we can actually use those funds budget-wise as far as water and sewer, 911, and other items that we perhaps need to fund. SPLOST overall, we basically pulled a great deal of funds out of there this year. If you saw that $17 million just a second ago, we basically started at a fund balance of $25 million, and that change of 11, which pulled us down to 13. That still allows us to have funds on hand for the various projects that we pay for in full when you approve them. And then, of course, our other governmental funds were at 2.5. So overall, our fund balances are at about $35 million. sometimes we get questions about, well, what does our balance sheet look like? You know, old school is, you know, assets minus liabilities equals, you know, your equity. And so in this particular slide, we basically have tried to simply show, you know, what our financial assets are, the cash and cash equivalents, our financial liabilities as far as our accounts payable, performance bonds that we may need to pay out, and then also to the net financial position, which, as we spoke of just a minute ago, the total fund balance that we have, you'll see at the bottom is the $12,486,000. Of that, there's about 2.3 that's unrestricted. That's inventory or performance bonds or prepaids that have already been slotted. We have 4.2 in committed, and then the 5.9 in unassigned.
It shows 4.2 certain portions of rainy day. How much is rainy day?
That's another term for it, yes, ma'am.
How much of the 4.2 is rainy day?
All of it.
Oh, okay. I just understand that.
Then we're switching over to our proprietary funds. Our proprietary funds, you know better as what you term, I think in your training, enterprise type funds. They're those funds that are more like a business activity. And so I wanted to give an overview of those. Our overview of those basically is our water, our wastewater treatment, sanitation, and then our other smaller proprietary funds. Within our operating revenues for water and sewer, we were at $2,074,000, along with operating expenses of basically $2,092,000 for what is a net loss of about $17,000. One of the things I wanted to call your attention to here, though, is that in the past, as you know, we had impact fees. Those impact fees were moved or transferred into our water and sewer to pay our water and sewer debt. One of the things that the board has changed in last year, and why this change has a look of change to it, is that we had switched from impact fees to our cost recovery fees. Those cost recovery fees are then directly deposited and show as revenues within our water and sewer and our wastewater. So that's one of the changes if you look from this year to last year as far as the overall look of the net loss or net gains on these particular funds.
That's a good thing, in my opinion.
It makes it a little bit clearer for individuals to understand, you know, the actual operational end of it. Overall, basically, we had non-operating expenses of about $411,000. That is basically the interest that we're paying on those. So our income before transfers or loss was $428,000. We transferred in about $1.5 million. So our net change in position was about 1.1. The beginning position for the year was 5.9. So that moved us to right at 7 million. When you look at each one of these, that basically is the synopsis of the year. And so the same holds true with the wastewater operating. We had revenues of $583,000, operating expenses of 1.1 for a net of the 534. Then with the interest added on to that, we basically had a net loss of 938,000. Transfers in of 261, so that related to the net change in position of 672. And as such, if you net those two with the beginning of the year, then we're at 579. With our sanitation, our actual operating revenues went to 3.2, with operating expenses of 2.9. So we had an overall net income of 226,000. And then we basically had an income of 227,121. The 235, I believe, was interest that we actually earned on that piece of it. And then net change in position would have been the 54.5. So our beginning plus the net change for the current year puts us at 1.5. Overall, in our proprietary funds, you'll see that we moved from 7.3 to 7.9. This is just simply a graphical view of the general fund. This current year, as far as our general budget, our actual revenue, and our actual expenditures. And this is basically a pie slice of exactly what we received in as far as revenue sources. In this case, of course, our property tax, our TAV tax, and other taxes equal to basically about 54% of our overall revenues. Our sales taxes that actually came in were 5.7, or right at 22%. And then intergovernmental would have been at right at 2 million, and so that's right at 8% of the funds that we receive. This is important so that when we're looking at our fee structures and so forth, we try not to rely as heavy as we can on the actual property tax. We try to make sure that the funds that we have are diversified in nature. The next slide is just simply to give y'all a comparison from 2013 to 2014. We talked about earlier the fact that the increases in our property tax were due to the title ad valorem tax on vehicles, along with some pickup from the prior years as far as actual revenue from property tax. Then our sales tax that we received in, along with intergovernmental, we went basically overall from 27.4 up to 28.1. This just gives you a visual view of the expenditures for the county, where we actually spend our greatest dollar. As you can see, our public safety overall is 52% of the expenditures that we have, and then general government at 16, along with our judicial, health, recreation, and public works.
I can ask you one question backwards. Based on the comparative schedule of revenue, when it's shown 2013 and 2014, and so it shows the amount of property tax we collected for each one of those years. And I just want to make mention, if I understand correctly, I think I do, correct me if I'm wrong, that between 13 and 14, we actually collected $1 million additional in property tax, but that was without increasing the millage. It was actually a small decrease in the millage. So we received more money without increasing the requirement on people. So it's either through assessments that were increased or from new development or business.
I would say it's primarily from new development through the increase in the overall property tax digest would have been a portion of that. Since we held the millage at the same rate, then no one technically, okay, as they say, actually received an increase.
I just thought it was a positive that I wanted to be sure.
Yes, that is correct. And older property taxes from prior years, along with increased revenue from the motor vehicle. Our schedule of expenditures, this is just a comparison to give you a quick review of where we currently are. And what we did for 2013, 2014. And what you'll see is that in 2013, we're at $27.9 million. And in 2014, we ended at $27.2 million. Yes, I think that difference is a result, not necessarily all in one place. It is a result of actions by every single department head, a result of administration reviewing and going through those budgets with people, and our financial policies that are in place at this point, where things are being asked about. And so it's a little bit of everything that has helped contribute.
I believe that's something that everyone should be commended for, staff, everyone involved, because it's fairly unheard of to spend less each year as you go forward. So I think we've done a good job in that. Proud of that.
these two schedules are the schedules that we spoke of regarding SPLOST. These schedules are divided into two parts. We have two different SPLOST actually in process at this point. We have our 2007 SPLOST and our 2012 SPLOST because we are still working on projects that go back to the 2007 SPLOST. So within public buildings, for instance, there was $325,000 if you look at the column within the current year. We basically, in this current year, spent about $110,000 on miscellaneous building type, along with interest that we paid of about $214,000. The $1,119,000 that you see in that current year actually is the portion of Blue Jay. And in this particular slide, we also expended funds for DOT that don't show in this particular amount. The DOT funds were basically $1,048,000 that we expended on top of that $119,000. These are just simply SPLOST funds. So out of the 2007 SPLOST, we spent about $1.4 million. In our 2012, let me call your attention again to the current year. In that current year column, we basically had the county jail. That's the 3.1 is the certificates of participation. The roads and streets, we basically spent about 1.2 on ash roads and about 161,000 on Bunyan Kessler and some other miscellaneous roads that the board had put on the list to ensure were done this current year. We spent about $165,000 in actual drainage costs. If you remember, one of the projects that we completed this year was Westwood. That was about $119,000 of that. This last year, we went ahead and did 2 of the vehicle remounts for EMS. For the ambulance remounts, that was $176,000 that we spent. We spent about $31,000 on new servers in the technology area. And then, of course, our payments out to the city of 1.1. So overall, within our current year, we spent out about 6.5 out of our current 2012 SPLOST expenditures. One of the things I wanted to put in here this year was, I think it's valuable for the citizens to know what we're spending their SPLOST dollars on. We publish this information in the paper in December of each year. Sometimes we get an awful lot of questions and calls, and sometimes not. But one of the major projects that we have done and have slotted in this last round of SPLOST was the $16 million project for the jail and the sheriff's office. I think everyone knows that the jail portion of that project has been completed and is operational, and we are in the throes of trying to get the second portion, or second phase of that project done, which is the sheriff's office complex. And I believe that we should hopefully have that completed in the next several months. In addition to that, we wanted to call your attention to the local roads that are in process. And I think costs can probably speak better to the actual pieces within this. But this information was the information that was relayed recently within the DOT structure. And I'm not sure if he wants to go into more information. But basically, we go through and we're doing the courthouse road extension. Within that, the planning, the engineering, and the right-of-way, and the acquisition is underway, and that construction is to follow. We have about 21 miles of Ash Road repair and resurfacing that we did a contract in August of 2014 that's in process. And in addition to that, as far as resurfacing, we're looking at about 12 roads in 2015, and those are listed before you as far as the items that we are in process and hope to have done within the next few months. The actual completed items, we've completed about 20 miles of ash roads and repair or resurfacing of about 21 county roads. Bunyan Kessler, Zitbriar, we've done full depth reclamation and resurfacing. Old Augusta Road, of course. the intersection improvements at Blue Jay and Midland, and then, of course, Blue Jay and McCall Road improvements. The final piece of that is then, of course, where do we stand as far as our actual overall owns cost. Our cash at this point is about $15 million that we have on hand. Accounts payable or liabilities that we have is about 2.6. And so that gives us a net asset from our liabilities of about 13 million. As far as our overall positions in fund balance, we're at that 13,709,000. Of course, all of those funds are restricted because they're all restricted for this particular purpose. In the current year, we did have 3 audit findings. There were audit efficiency findings, and I would like to go through those with you. The first one is a condition where when our auditors reviewed several of the items that we have to report for property and equipment, there were several items that we did not get recorded within our financial statements. Those 2 items basically were one, a piece of land that was donated to us as far as infrastructure, and then a deed within our water and sewer items that we did not record. Those 2 items they did record, add those to our financial statements, so they are within the audited financial statements. They, however, have recommended that we go through those minutes rather than at year end, that we actually go through those minutes. So within our management response, we basically said that in the past, that has always been a function where the clerk, the finance director, and the roads director gets together. I'm not sure if this board is necessarily aware that every single road we take, okay, we have to add to our financial statements and so forth. At times that becomes very cumbersome to identify every single one of these. So what we're going to do is to set up a separate file within our shared drives so that those particular documents are put in there and we can cross-reference those with the actual minutes to ensure that we get every single piece recorded.
Well, if I can ask this possibility, I see that the audit recommendations that we recommend a finance director review board minutes prior to closing the year to ensure that all relevant transactions are recorded. It may even be beneficial that you just do that on a monthly basis.
One of the things that we put in our management responses is that we will do it on a quarterly basis.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Because it's easy to miss if you're trying to do it in bulk.
It is. And what you'll see is in management's response is that the clerk, myself, and the roads director will all meet. You'll see it in the last line to ensure we capture the recording of all property we will begin to address quarterly and place the documents in a separate file. The second one is a matter of unreported retainage. This was an item on one of our construction items in which we have a checklist to go through as far as retainage and payables and so forth. In this particular case, they noted that there was $110,000 of retainage payable that was not recorded. And the actual payable itself was recorded, but the retainage was not. All of our other retainage was recorded. This was just an oversight that we missed in looking at the entry. So to try and structure it such that we ensure that we pick up every single item, we're going to actually put the documents within our work papers. That way when I'm looking at the actual entry being recorded, I'm also looking at the document to make sure that I'm checking that. The last one, we had to read this year, was miscoded transactions within the sheriff's special funds. These are funds, the condition of the audit committee was during our audit, we noted capital outlays in the special funds of the sheriff, which were not segregated from current operating expenses and prepaid expenses for software not installed and in use. Were not recorded as assets. These are not accounts that are in the custody of the finance department. These accounts are held by the sheriff's office, and we got summary information on this. The auditor's recommendation is that the finance department review the activity and bank statements of these special funds to ensure that the disbursements are properly recorded. Management concurs with this in establishing this protocol, that will work with the sheriff's office to actually review their activity. In other words, the individual transactions, to ensure that the information that we're getting in summary doesn't have something hidden in it that we cannot ensure that those items are recorded properly.
I'm going to discuss that with Sheriff McDuffie. He's already concurred with that.
I've already talked to Jimmy and I already talked to Jeremy, and so we have plans for this next year to actually identify the actual details and for me to review their actual book.
Are they going to do that monthly? You've gotten that far as far as setting up how often you're going to do it?
We haven't discussed that, but that would not be a bad idea, is to go ahead and get that information, then we can move forward. Last but not least, of course, our auditors are here. That is Mr. Richard Deals, and also too, Mr. Kay Proctor. And they are here for any questions or comments that y'all may have.
I asked mine as open.
Three items is a lot better than 38.
Major improvement. I'm just very pleased. I know it was a lot in the time frame that we had again, and I'm just so thankful that everybody worked together and got it to us in a timely manner as well.
And I want to thank y'all for getting this thing done. And I know that the original calendar put this thing out to December, and I said, we can't take a chance on being late again. And the calendar was moved up, and I appreciate y'all coming up with the task of getting it done. The statements that I've read here says that none of our management hindered you in any way in getting your work done. So
That's correct.
I want to be sure of that, so that's good. And y'all rose to the task of getting the number put together, and three items from your professional opinion is not that bad, is it?
There's been a lot of improvements. I think that the finance department really took findings to heart and worked hard to correct any items. I'm sorry. Do you need me to say my name too, or do you? Kay Proctor, sorry. I did want to just briefly discuss a few things on the findings, just some clarification. Finding number one on the unrecorded property and equipment, and the reason that in particular this transaction was perhaps not material to the financial statements. However, the way we found this is when we were reviewing our minutes of once over, we looked at these to say, has this been recorded, has this been recorded, has this been recorded? And that was our purpose for saying that it needs to be done at least annually. I think quarterly is great as long as it's done in that nature of making sure that everything's gone within the financial statements. Also on the unrecorded retainage, that was an isolated, as Joanna said, that was an isolated unrecorded liability. However, there have been unrecorded liability findings in the past, therefore we kept it in as a deficiency. And on the sheriff's special revenue funds, all of these transactions were recorded in Sheriff McDuffie's QuickBooks. It was just a communication with getting them into the trial balance in a way that it translated to getting to the fixed asset records.
Appreciate that.
Is the report that's been given to this board a true and actual accounting of, and in keeping with your opinions of the audit?
In accordance with, yes, generally accepted governmental auditing
Gotcha.
principles.
Any questions from the board?
I want to thank the board for the opportunity to serve as the auditors, and thank Joanna and her staff on working, together on this tight schedule, to get it done in November.
And also your constitutional officers have been very helpful throughout this process.
Good. Because it's a team. We can't do it by ourselves. Everybody has to work together.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your hard work. Will y'all be interested in meeting on this again for coming year?
Yes, I think we'd be interested after we've got 2 years under our belt now.
We didn't wear you down too much.
It's good you're asking us that this year instead of last year.
I understand.
How was
Still
that?
gave that I'm kind of tired look.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Any questions from any board members?
It's 7:07, Chairman.
Yeah, we need to move to.
7:07, it's planning board.
I understand. I think we can finish this right quickly.
Would like to make a motion for that.
The item before us is whether to affirm the audited financial statements, whether to affirm and to approve the audit and submit to the state of Georgia, or to provide with other direction.
I'd like to make a motion that we go with that recommendation, number 2, and affirm the audited financial statement and approve the audit and submission to the state of Georgia on time.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried.
I had the words on time.
Thank y'all.
Thank
We couldn't afford to be late again. Did you have something else to say, Joanne?
No, sir.
Just
You
look
will
like-
see in your packets, I believe, the direction action plan, and we'll submit that to the state.
All right, the time is past 7 o'clock. It's time for our planning board presentation. Apologize to those of you in the audience for these items, for us running a little bit behind. We'll best to get that finished rather than stop and start again. All right, first item. Planning board recommends approving an application by William Lane to rezone 1.03 acres located on Hiawassee Avenue from AR1 to AR2, map number 330A, parcel number 3 in the first district.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lane has 2.32 acres in Melbourne, on Hiawassee. As many of you are aware, Melbourne was created about 100 years ago and cut up into some very small lots. He actually owns what was 8 platted lots. It's zoned AR1, which of course, as most of Melbourne is non-conforming. Being able to rezone the 1.03 acres will create a conforming lot that he would like to, I believe, give to a daughter. And then that will leave the one existing non-conforming lot, but it will be at least improved. Staff and planning board recommend approval.
That's it.
What's on the one lot that'll be left remaining that's non-conforming? Is it an empty lot? Or?
It's an empty lot. We plan on adjoining it to the property we own now, and making it AR1 and filing homestead on it.
So will you state your name just for the...
William Lane.
All right. And I presume that you were for this.
Yes.
Anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak for this rezoning? Anyone that wishes to speak against it? Any questions from the board? First district.
I make a motion we approve the planning board staff recommendations.
Second. Have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried.
Thank you, sir.
At our next meeting, sir, we will have that to be read the second time, and then we'll...
Good deal. Thank you.
Next item, the planning board recommends approving an application by Nicky Powell Jr. to rezone 8.64 acres located at 2005 Hodgeville Road from AR1 to AR2, map number 435, parcel number 38 in the second district.
Yes, sir. Mr. Powell owns the 8.64 acres. It is currently zoned AR1. We wish to subdivide it and split it in half, which requires it to be rezoned to AR2. Both planning board and board commissioner, planning board and staff recommended approval. Planning board did recommend to limit it to only 2 lots, and this is
what the applicant intends to do is to create a home for himself and I believe a family member.
Nicky Powell Jr. It's kind of split up for family use. My father-in-law and mother-in-law wants to move there, so I've already got a house going on the other side.
All right, public hearing. Anyone else here wish to speak for this rezoning? Anyone against? Second district.
I make a motion that we approve staff recommendation with the 4 stipulations to change the zoning and that we allow the permitted use as that zoning allows, so that we not put an additional stipulation above that on it.
Second.
Motion and a second. Now, Bill, I can understand, so that it's limited to.
So it's not limited to 2, that's not the typical zoning, and the planning board just added that. And
Staff recommendation.
I wanted to be sure I understood your motion and your second to that. Right.
they can keep, the citizen can keep it limited to that if they want to, but they don't have to.
Thank you.
Have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Next item, planning board recommends approving an application by Wayne and Gail Winsky to rezone 4.80 acres located on Highway 119 North from AR2 to AR1 to combine with an adjoining parcel, map number 408, parcels 14, 14A, 14B, 14C in the 3rd district.
Yes, sir. The Winskys purchased what was 4 lots that had been created for, presumably for sale at some point, and they had been rezoned to AR2. The Winskys own the property behind these 4 lots that are front 119. They would like to purchase it and combine the property to make one large piece. This is their intention. Staff and planning board recommend approval.
Actually, we've already purchased it.
Yeah, you've already purchased it. You've already combined it.
Wayne Winsky, by the way. Yeah.
All right, you got something to say? Please state your name for the record.
Wayne Winsky.
Scale Winsky.
And I presume you're for this.
Yes, sir. We're just trying to combine that to our home place, and that requires a rezoning. So that's all there is to it.
All right, public hearing. Anyone else here wish to speak for this act? Anyone against? Yes, so.
I'll make a motion to approve planning board and staff recommendation.
Second. I have a motion and 2 seconds. So I pretty well know where the vote's going. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. And
Now, do we have to come back again, or is this?
you will not.
We do
There
not.
will be a second reading of this at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I still want to change that.
Well,
I understand. Well, at least we got it to some sense. All right, anybody else? All right, we will take 5-minute break. Let's say we come back in here at 25 after. That's about 7. We'll take it back up. All right. I think we took care of items number 6 and 7 at the same time, did we not? Yes. Yes. This is what I thought. Next item, number 8, consideration to approve the first reading to amend the litter control ordinance.
Yes, sir. We do currently have a litter control ordinance in our solid waste section of our ordinances. This amendment is in keeping with our new requirement becoming a new MS4. We do have to address litter as a potential pollutant into our county waters as well as on land. And this adds a few words. It's not a massive change from what exists, but it does talk about degradation of water and aquatic resources by litter. Talks about littering being prohibited in any waters in unincorporated Effingham County. And it does changes the fines. It actually makes the fines go up a little bit for littering.
This is part of that process to bring us in compliance to the MS4.
This is one of the easier steps. We brought that forward now.
Just a Georgia one? What? Is it better?
MS4 is when we became part of the urbanized.
Yeah.
The MS4 is regulated by EPA, so it's a federal law, but it's administered through EPD, so the state administers it, but part of that is control of waste by building contractors. So you'll also see, hopefully in December, we'll bring to you revisions to the ENS ordinance, which also addresses the same litter controls at the building site, but it needs to be in both ordinances. So this is another step in the ordinances that we'll be bringing forward, just like the stormwater and LDM is later in this same.
Any throw trash that's going to get into stormwater that's going to run downstream and get.
That's the thought process, yes, sir.
All right. Any questions? Motion?
Make a motion that we adopt the first reading and revision of the ordinance.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. Next item, consideration to accept a limited warranty deed for infrastructure and rights of way within Georgia Plantation subdivision.
You do this.
Georgia Plantation platted in 2004 under our old rules. We at the time did not accept the roads at the time of final plat. There are 3 roads in the subdivision. It is also served by county water. So we are asking to accept the roads and the piping within the rights of way. And inspections have been made and taxes have been paid. And the deed has been prepared and reviewed by the county attorney.
Questions? Motion?
Make a motion to approve order number 1.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. Next item, consideration to approve the first reading to amend Chapter 36, Fire Protection and Fire Prevention Regulations, Article 3, Section 36-29.
Mr. Chairman, this was brought about as part of the ISO reviews we've been doing with the ISO consultant in preparation for our next review by ISO. In going through all of those pieces, it was discovered, there was questions asked about our current fire prevention code and the adequacy of it to meet ISO requirements and get the full amount of points. And in reviewing the ordinance, we read that currently it reads as hereby adopted by the county commissioners that certain code known as the International Building Code, Commerce International, being particularly the 2000 edition. Our building codes reference the same international fire codes, but they were read a little bit differently in that the building code states that we recognize the code as currently adopted by DCA, which is now the 2012 version of the International Fire Prevention Code. So basically all we really want to do in this is to bring the language the same so that we recognize that we're working off of the correct version of the International Fire Code. So that will change to, there's hereby adopted by the County Commission that certain code known as the International Building Code, Commerce International, being more particularly the 2012 edition of the International Fire Prevention Code, and any future editions here and adopted by Effingham County or the State Department of Community Affairs. So that brings it more in line with our building code and brings us up to the current version of the code. Other than that, the code remains unchanged.
And puts the language in there that future updates that's already taken care of.
Yes, sir. So they doesn't have to come back in the future to do that. And we'll be bringing the flood ordinance to you very similar because it has the exact same issue in it within the next few months.
Same thing. All right. No questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve order number 1.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. Next item, consideration to award a contract and issue a notice to proceed for Old Augusta Road and Hodgeville Road restriping.
Two different issues here. You know, as the board will recall, Commissioner Mason has brought up concerns with the center line striping on Old Augusta Road. The sheriff expressed some concerns on a portion of Hodgeville. Those two were put together into this particular bid. Bids were solicited from our normal sources, our website, GLGA, the newspaper, Department of Administrative Services website. After that, we received two bids. However, one of them came in after the deadline and remained unopened because it did not get here on time. So that leaves us with one bidder that actually met the requirements, which is peak pavement marking. Their price was $5,275 for Old Augusta and $6,062.50 for Hodgeville. Peak responded in accordance with all the terms and conditions of the invitation to bid. So with that, the board, obviously have several options. You can award the contract for one or both of these two roads or none.
Is that sort of in line, the price for those?
It is. It's a little bit higher because there's eradication in both of these two. We have to go in and grind off the existing markings and move and pull up the existing pavement markings that are on there, because to double stripe it splits the center line. You have a 3-stripe wide piece there, just being a 50.
Well, we don't have nothing else to compare to. That's the reason I asked that question.
But you're saying the cost is higher, but the bid isn't higher, you're saying?
Well, the cost is higher because the eradication of the bids is not, and it's in line. We just did one on McCall Road, which we received multiple bids on. Old Augusta striping, all of our resurfacing projects, so the cost already high.
So you want to approve both of these at one time?
That's the recommendation.
Yes, sir. The contract was, yes, sir. The bill was for both roads, so I would suspect, unless the board has an issue with one of the two not wanting to do the road, yes, I would suggest that you approve them both together. Correct.
Make a motion to approve alternate number one. There.
Motion and a second to approve alternate number one, which is
Both roads.
both roads, $11,337.50. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Next item, consideration to approve Effingham County 2015 Local Maintenance Improvement Grant, LMIG project.
This is something that we do every year, Mr. Chairman. There's a portion of the motor fuel tax that's collected by the state that's set aside for this LMIG program, and the percentage is set by the legislature every single year. Our formula amount for this year is $628,407.79. It's what we will get this coming year. Y'all may recall this was the old LARP program that was changed a couple of years ago, and now comes to us in just a check. We are responsible for administering it in accordance with GDOT's criteria. In the last 13 and 14, we combined those funds together to do Blue Jay and McCall. That's where those funds were expended on. It was 1.2 or 1.3 million dollars. Trying to get to the level.
Actually, that was 2 years.
It was 2 years, that's correct. And it's in your book, in the letters. It was 500, 600, I believe it was $1.3 million total that we spent in Blue Jay and McCall. We also received money in 14 for emergency funding for dirt road repairs that were washed out due to the high amounts of rain. That was $34,392.62 in addition to the 1.2233 was the total of those two funds for Blue Jay and McCall. So you'll see letters in here to Mr. Mosley stating the status of this particular program, which basically says that all the work on those two have been completed at this point. And you'll see a list. This LMIG list is 3 roads that I picked basically arbitrarily to try to keep 3 that are close to one another and to get the total to sum up close to what we need. These are 3 of the 15 roads that we had earlier, or 12 roads for paving.
They're all high need.
Yes, ma'am, but they're roads that are intended to be on the paved road list. I picked 3 out of that arbitrarily just to keep them close to one another. We will bid all these together. The reason I want to keep them separated like this is because anything we do with LMIG funds has to have certain testing, certain monitoring, certain requirements that GDOT does. I don't want to have to do that on all of these roads, and we'll only have to do it on certain ones. So again, I picked Wiley, High Bluff, and Long Ridge are all 3 roads that connect to one another. And the total cost of those comes up pretty close to what we need. In addition to the $600,000 that we have to, or that we get from the state on LMIG, we have to put a 30% match for that. Georgia code requires that, and that's a condition of the failure to pass T-SPLOST in our region. So we have to match that with 30%. So again, I don't want to put all the roads together because of the match. These 3 roads get us pretty close to the dollar figure.
So you got a method of reasoning?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. Basically, if we have to spend $188.5 in order to get from the state $628.4.
Correct. And again, that money was going to be spent anyhow because these were in those 12 roads. So this is just a way of segregating now 3 roads that match pretty much the 628 plus the $188 figure.
So this board is committing to spend $188,522.34 in order to get the $628,477.79, and we have to designate where we think we're going to spend it, and that's these 3 roads.
Yes, sir, that's accurate.
So we'll have $816,000 basically to spend on $930,000 worth of project.
Correct. And again, these were out of that list of the total numbers.
It's all on the list.
Money we were saying we were planning on spending anyway, and we're getting most of it from the state.
Yes, ma'am.
Good.
That's the win-win.
Motion.
Make a motion, we approve alternative 1, approve the L&IG project list.
Second.
I just have a question before we take that up. If that's approving the project list, is that by default saying that this board is agreeing to the 30% match?
I would say, yeah.
Or do we not need to have that as part of our motion?
In order to approve the list, we've got to have the funding.
Like approving the contract, we don't have to approve the amount in the contract, we just approve the contract.
Okay. I just want to be sure that I think the state, and what they're looking for is that we have to agree to the 30% match.
Correct. We have to, and we'll have to report to them that we spent at least as much as, their amount plus the 30% match.
It was in our presentation, Mr. telling us that, and we're voting yes to it. So.
Okay.
And it's already budgeted within your short-term work program and in your current budgeted figures. We've already shown that we probably would get about $500,000 from the state and have those expenditures within your current
I
budget.
understand it was just a question that I had as to whether or not we needed to be specific, that we knew as a board we were voting for the 30% match. All of that. Have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Discussion on proposed changes to the Water Resources Protection Ordinance and Stormwater Management Local Design Manual.
This is another requirement of the MS4 designation. As I'm sure all of y'all are aware, we currently have a Water Resources Protection Ordinance and a Local Design Manual. Those 2 ordinances were adopted by the board in 2005, and they were predicated on the Georgia Stormwater Management Manual. One of the requirements of the MS4 or the general permit for discharge to the MS4 is that we, being one of the coastal counties, adopt a coastal supplement. So basically what this is a revision to the existing ordinance to adopt the coastal supplement, and it's predicated on a model ordinance that comes straight out of the CSS for at least the ordinance, and then the local design manual is largely our old local design manual modified for the CSS. And with that, I'm sure every one of y'all already received word of this, so y'all ready for the quiz that's about to come.
All right.
If you read the staff report and facts and findings, it got very long, but what I was trying to do is basically outline the reasons that we did this, the reasons that a lot of the pieces of this ordinance are there, comes directly out of the permit. It's a response to the requirements of the permit. Illicit discharge detection and elimination is a new, it's actually in our current stormwater management ordinance, but it shows up in here again. It's a requirement of the permit, and the sections are all listed there for illicit discharge. Stormwater design manual is a direct requirement of the permit, as green infrastructure, low impact development. The reason I want to point this one out more particularly is because our population is over 10,000. They look at the county population, not the population in the urbanized area. Because it was over 10,000, we have to go through and begin to do a review on our building codes and ordinances and regulations to ensure that they don't prohibit or impede the use of green infrastructure, low impact development practices, including infiltration, reuse, and evapotranspiration. Specifically parking ordinances and road design standards. So what that means is we'll have to go through all our ordinances, review our parking ordinances and so forth, and it may be that we need to start doing overflow parking for pervious parking and those sort of things, but we'll discuss that later. That's not about February, that's something we have a little bit of time to do.
It's probably a good thing.
It probably is, quite frankly. I think we need to go through a lot of our ordinances that are getting a little old. The post-construction stormwater management ordinance, again, like I said, is a requirement, but there's an existing one. What I did is much like the development manual. If you go through this document, periodically you'll see a little red piece of text that says new. I'm trying to find the first one. 4.2 stormwater management concept plan. When you see that, that's something we don't currently require. You'll notice there's not a whole lot of news in here. For the most part, this is, I'm not going to say the same orders, but the same requirements that we currently have. And as we go through the stormwater management concept plan, is exactly what it says prior to full development of the stormwater management plan. It's a concept plan that does some of the higher level looks at it. There's a meeting, the consultation meeting 4.3 with staff. And the whole purpose of it is just like when we went through the design manual, we talked about having a pre-design meeting. It's really intended for a way to staff it with the developer and developers, engineers, prior to a whole lot of money being spent to make sure we're all on the same page. It's really all it's for.
Well, a short version for me, question would be, out of the 82 pages, being an engineer by trade, is there anything in here that you see of concern that you think we still need to make adjustments to?
Yes, there is. There's an area that's of large concern to me that I'll get to very quickly. The other ones are all the maintenance responsibilities, ongoing maintenance. There's going to come a time that we are responsible for, and I'll translate, this is what concerns me, is, and I'm going to try to read this, straight out of the permit, it requires that the permitted inventory all publicly owned post-construction stormwater management structures, that's detention ponds, retention ponds, that's what that means, water quality vaults, designed after the date designated as MS4, so that's all publicly owned, it's ones that we own. So that 100% of the structures within a 5-year period develop a long-term operation and maintenance program for post-construction stormwater management, again, detention ponds. Then for privately owned structures, ones that we do not own, with construction completed after the date of designation, we must either conduct maintenance or require maintenance agreements. That's out of the permit. So we really have a choice that either we have to provide the maintenance on these things or we have to have an agreement for maintenance. That is at the back of your local design manual. You'll see that agreement that comes in here. It is to be recorded with the deed records and run with the deeds of the property records of the particular parcel, requiring that maintenance. My concern in this is if you look in section 6.1 of the ordinance, it begins to set out how that maintenance inspections and the responsibilities go. And you'll see 6.1 is the maintenance responsibility. If the responsible party, and I'm gonna kind of skip around, I got sections of my highlighted, but if the responsible party is a homeowners association or other owners association, this document requires a copy of the recorded declaration that provides, so they have to have covenants basically, a declaration on property that must provide these things that it sets out to enumerate. My concerns come in page 18 of 28.
Say again?
Page 18 of 28 of the local, of the stormwater management ordinance. Should be the first one that's in there.
18 of 82.
72 of 82.
There's two different page numbers, I'm sorry. There's an item number and then a document number.
72 of
Yeah, the
82.
little one, 72 of 82.
It's the one that says Effingham County Post-Construction Stormwater Management Ordinance, page 18 of 28, and then there's another set of page numbers that
I got
are for each item.
72 of 82.
So if you look under 6.1, everybody there? Again, if the responsible party is a homeowner association or other owners association, then a copy of recorded declaration provided. Again, I skipped around, I left out some words in there. Number 4 says that the requirements of the inspection and maintenance agreement and plan shall receive the highest priority for expenditures by the association, except for any other expenditures that are required by law. This is in the declarations. This is what we're telling, say, a homeowner association that has to be in their covenants. That a separate fund shall be maintained by the association for the routine maintenance, reconstruction, and repair of the green infrastructures. Number 6, that the routine maintenance, reconstruction, repair fund shall contain at all times the dollar amount reasonably determined by the county to be adequate to pay. So now we're in their funds, we're telling them how much they have to hold in a separate fund for maintenance that has to be funded ahead of any other thing, so the petunias go undone at the end. That, stormwater comes first.
And these are entities that by nature dissolve and go away.
Which brings me to number 7, that to the extent permitted by law, the association shall not enter into voluntary dissolution unless responsibility of green infrastructure has been transferred. We all know we can't do that. We can't enforce these things.
You have to have a bond.
What about enforcement strength?
You have to have a bond that lasted forever.
So the next thing says, in lieu of that agreement, the infrastructure may be dedicated to Effingham County. So if we're going to go that way, which I'm not suggesting we don't, I think we just need to have some mechanism by which we intend to accept those. If you skip on 6.1 and 6.3, going on with the records of maintenance activities, responsible party shall make and maintain records of all inspections, maintenance, and repairs, and shall retain the records for a period of 5 years. So we're required to inspect them and then keep the records. So 6.4 is what happens if you fail. If the responsible party fails or refuses to meet the terms, basically Effingham County, after 30 days written notice, comes in, corrects the violation, and to get everything back. And then 6.41 is the cost recovery. Effingham County may assess the responsible party, which is the homeowners association again, for the cost of repairing, which shall become a lien on the property and may be placed on the ad valorem tax bill. So basically what we said is that, we're going to make you have these declarations. We can't keep in existence. If you fail to do it, we come in and maintain them. If we have to do it, we're going to basically put liens on everybody's property and put it on the tax bill. My personal opinion is that's not a workable solution. It's not viable, but I will say this is in our current ordinance. Our current ordinance reads this way.
Because they adopted what they...
The model, correct. So what that leads me down to is a discussion amongst this board. This is really my only concern that I have over this ordinance is how do we enforce it? And I think we have 2 choices. Either by the permit, we have to enter into an agreement, or we have to take responsibility. So either we have to do some form of agreement, and there's got to be a way to enforce it. That's the only way I know to enforce it. If we all believe that's not workable, we can't enforce it, the opposite of that is we take all these ponds. And if we begin to take them, then the question is, how do we fund them? Which leads you all the way back to a discussion we had 2 years ago with stormwater utility, which was not popular amongst the board at that time. So going forward into the adoption of this ordinance, I would like some guidance from the board how we want to handle these, because again, by the permit, we're required to do something, but whatever we do needs to be a workable solution, or I fear that we'll be back in the situation of these subdivision roads in a few years, trying to dig our way out of these things.
For tonight, we just have, it's just discussion purpose.
It's just discussion, but by February 15th, I have to have this adopted, and we only, if you have an item on here, there may only be one shot at this in December, 2 in January, so I do need an answer fairly quickly so that we can have the 2 readings to get this out in February.
There should be a perpetual assessment on the taxes for those parcels. You run with it, that's the funding mechanism. I'm just thinking out loud.
And we can do it, and we can debate the merits of the utility, which,
Well, I mean.
that's pretty much it. You can take somebody's house and they're making it work.
You got a better shot than paying the
That's
tax.
just like the roads.
You got a better shot than paying the tax. Any community property that HOA has. Just to think it through.
And then prior to coming back to y'all, there are some changes down at the bottom of this that the attorney recommended I didn't have time to do, but before getting your book, it mainly is in the legalese of it, the enforcement provisions and how it goes to court. This was not real accurate. Those will be made, I won't point out.
Yeah, it's, the changes I made to it were basically just legal procedure changes and as to how adverse decisions are appealed in the process for basically prosecuting an ordinance violation.
Is there something in it that requires arbitration prior to lawsuit? Can we do that?
There's nothing in there that requires it. There is a provision in there now where essentially if there's a violation found, then the county engineer or the county administrator gives a notice of that violation and then they have I think it's a 30-day window to correct it. If they want to appeal that, they can appeal it to the board, but this is all before an actual violation is placed. So it's, they already do sort of have a grace period to correct it and appeal any findings before we actually, hit it with a violation of the ordinance.
Yeah, right now.
It's sort of like a notice of abatement for a nuisance proceeding.
And this is going to apply, but it's already in the ordinance and it's already applying. It's already applying.
It's in the ordinance that's currently adopted by the board.
When was that adopted?
2005. I don't know the exact date, it was in 2005, I have to research.
So what you are saying is as in with the roads, we already have the problem. That's what you're saying.
Well, sort of, you do, but the difference is you weren't required to do maintenance on them until the MS4 came. It's that permit, that general permit that's requirement for the maintenance. And let me be real clear about something so I don't mislead y'all. The requirement in the MS4 is only in the urbanized area. It's my position as staff that I'm suggesting to y'all that we make this ordinance apply countywide because that urbanized area is going to continue to grow. And as it grows, then we'll be ahead of the curve, so to speak. Now, y'all do not have to do that. You can make this apply only to the urbanized area. That is, I want to be clear that that's what it technically
well, and it's in order to help protect the things about being green and all that, which is what you really do want in an urbanized area.
I'll tell you, you asked earlier, in my opinion, as an engineer, the coastal supplement makes things better, not worse. Then we're already fortunate to go with the stormwater management manual. It's a good document.
But if we do move it to the urbanized area, we don't have a borrow problem of all the subdivisions we already have in this scenario.
Not until they come into the urbanized area. Once they do, well, because this requires you to go backwards then also. So you won't till then. Understand the next decennial census is when that will happen. We're talking, not quite 10 years because we're a few years into it, but it'll be a process. But at some point, I would imagine EPD comes up and says the entire county is going to be subject to these requirements.
Well, I don't think there's a question. You've got to move forward with trying to get this document done. And unless the board's got other opinions, move forward in the best way that you think with all the information that you've got presented to us.
With my only, from what I've heard tonight, if I could throw on something, I would say, my vote would be to keep it on the urbanized area, would not make it countywide. That's how I feel. Now, you may be able to help me deal otherwise with some additional conversation, I don't know.
And I believe in equality, so if you're going to do something in this small area, it needs to be across the whole county. Because sooner or later, that area is going to grow.
In theory, you could say you believe in equality, but there's different scenarios all over.
regardless of the framework,
What's equal isn't always
wherever it's enforced, the framework, we are discussing.
We already have those. What I'm hearing is we already have it, and we already have it.
Well, it needs some work, right?
That same
Well,
word.
and my question, so that I can rewrite this, is when you say only make it apply, what portion only apply? Because what we have here is an ordinance that allows us the framework for our stormwater ordinances. Then we have a local design manual that determines detention, retention requirements on height side.
Item number 6, was it item number 6?
Only the maintenance part of it.
Only item number 6 to the urbanized area. And what's inclusive of the urbanized area? And I'm just saying, I mean, we'll take a vote, and I might be by myself, so that's okay. But that was probably what I would do. So what is the urbanized area that you can?
Give me just a minute.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the ordinance will only,
Item number 6, he's saying that it's the requirement that's mandated to us that only the urbanized areas of the county does this need to apply. But we're saying, no, we'll just do everything.
well, a lot of it is.
Well, there's some very good things in MS4.
Yeah, but
You know, that you
understand the
limit
urbanized
it.
area
That
oftentimes
urbanized area.
you provide water and sewer to an urbanized area, but you don't run it out 50 miles. So there's different benefits to the urbanized area that cost you more money. And so it's a different scenario.
But Vera, remember, there are some good things in MS4, in this too,
Just in number 6, I'm only referring to number 6.
just number 6.
I'm only referring to number 6.
Only the maintenance requirements, the
The
maintenance agreement.
Maintenance of detention ponds on every detention pond in Effingham County. If y'all want to take that on, that's going to be a cost, and somebody's going to have to pay for it. Can you think it through?
Can y'all see that? It's probably still a little bit small.
Well, I thought we were talking about that.
There's two different pieces, and I don't fit one on the screen right now, but as you can see, it's Godly Road here, the Hodgson Road, down Deerfield.
I mean, I think a lot of subdivisions would be happy if we would take on responsibility for the maintenance of every detention pond in Effingham. So,
There's not a lot of development in it. This is, Regal Farms,
that's what I know.
the racetrack. Yeah, I guess this is probably part of Regal Farms too here. I don't know about this piece, and then there's just a few parcels. Most of it's swamp and undeveloped property in this side.
But then again, if you're making the point, and there is another side, I will say this, if you're making the point that if we don't do the entire county, we're going to have a lot of detention ponds all over the county that never get maintained, and then that provides us problems that create a higher cost because somebody's got to go and fix them and we got to deal with them. There's a point to that. And if that's your point, I can lean in that direction about that.
Well, what I was saying is because you can kind of see this pond right here. This is a private pond, but it's in the MS4, so we either have to be responsible for it or we have to do it by agreement. We're going back and finding somebody to do this by agreement now. It's probably going to be nearly impossible, which means we just inherited the responsibility for it. At some point, this area grows, and we're going to have that same issue of all the other ponds that are in there. It was what I was getting at. And this side's like, look, you're trying to think of the name of that subdivision.
So then we're going to have to go in and sign agreements with every place there's a detention pond?
I'm going to suggest a new development. As new development comes in, we get those agreements in place for either the maintenance of that particular facility, or we just go ahead and take them and figure out some way to fund them.
Okay, well, so you're not saying for it to apply to the existing?
It's not retroactive.
The existing in the MS4, correct. Not all the existing throughout the county.
Existing or which is?
These two areas.
Okay, so that's what I said.
Well, other than I'm saying get development agreements going forward in any other area because it ultimately will become part of the MS4 because the urbanized area continues to grow. Now, going back and getting all those individually, like you're saying, would be a monumentous task because most of them, for instance, some of them were cut up into lots.
Well, that's
so you have to
basically,
go to every single property owner that owns it now, try to get an easement. I mean, you're talking a major undertaking.
that's what I was afraid he was saying to begin with, was that we had to do them all. Okay.
No. We have to take responsibility for problems in these two red areas right here.
Which is what I was wanting.
But I guess going forward, what this ordinance contemplates is development agreements on new construction, not going backwards. So we make section 6 apply only to new development. I don't think it would ever be applicable, because I mean, you can pretty much see there's not a whole lot left. You may have a little bit in here, but for the most part, this is all wetlands. There's not any development to occur with it.
But the only time we'll address anything that's existing is as the urbanized area grows. We're gonna have to address those anyway.
You have to do it if you're correct. But again, this ordinance only contemplates new development, getting the covenants and the restrictions. So if we strike that, there's no maintenance agreements on new development. I'm not saying going backwards on existing.
Have you got the direction you need?
Well, we hashed it out for you.
So I guess, is the direction of the board to not include maintenance agreements in this ordinance?
After we continue through and I realized that we weren't talking about going back for everything at the county, I'm okay with that.
So maintenance agreements on new development.
Okay.
So, and the only other direction I need is the way this is
currently
currently.
So then I was like, okay, so we are already responsible for all that, and he's saying only for the urbanized.
Correct.
So, okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, the only other question is, as currently written, it requires declarations, agreements going forward. Is that, I don't know another way of doing it, quite honestly. I agree that it's probably not going to work, but I don't know how else you would do that. How else you could structure an agreement that puts anybody on the hook more so than they are with declaration of covenants and so forth.
When they put these mandates down to us, do they have sample agreements
This is it.
for us to have with the HOAs?
Oh, in the declaration, no, they don't. Now, there is a sample maintenance agreement that's at the back of this document.
I think it's best to try to build in a funding mechanism attached to the bar. I don't like that, but.
We'll move forward, we'll take a look at that and see if we can do anything, and we'll bring it back to y'all for our first reading. You still have another crack at it then before.
I'm sorry if I confused that.
No, I'm sure I did. I'm quite sure it was my excellent description of it. And the same thing with the other one, I won't go through it. There's really not a whole lot different in here. The sections that are new are new. There are a few things though. One is the section on easements and right-of-ways. We added that. That was something we discussed in the development manual also. I did go back and change this from that convoluted formula we had to just make it a lot more simple. And I made that same language in the development manual. The one thing I will say that is new, floodplain impacts. If you have a development in the floodplain, this LDM now requires compensating storage is provided based on floodplain mitigation. We haven't necessarily required that in the past. However, we don't have a lot of developments in floodplains. Detention ponds. This is one new. I'll discuss this with you real quick. Under 5.2 detention ponds, the LDM now requires that all stormwater ponds be constructed on subdivided parcels deeded for that particular use to a homeowners association and so forth. No stormwater management facility for residential subdivision shall be constructed in a whole or part on a parcel lot intended for future sale as residential property. All of y'all are probably aware that it's a commonly occurrence in this county to where developers don't want to own any property at the end. They take ponds and they cut it up into all the lots. This would prohibit that. If that's an issue for this board, that needs to be addressed in here. And again, the reason for that is it needs to be on a parcel by itself. It can have these deeds, this maintenance agreement running with it, with certain easements and so forth, which are defined in here as to what they need to be. But it is a departure from what we've done in the past. Obviously, green infrastructure practices are new. We've not done that in the past. That's just part of the coastal supplement. Special districts, there are none now. These are for 303 water quality violations we can set up in the future. And stormwater hotspots is really the biggest difference. Basically, a stormwater hotspot is more commonly a gas station around here is what you would consider. and this does require oil water separators for stormwater that comes into contact. These are some things other jurisdictions have done in the past. We don't currently do. It's a big box that all the drainage has to go into, so if there is a spill or something of petroleum, it's captured in this box. Again, if that's an issue, that's something we dealt with here, but it's not something other people aren't dealing with. Other than that, it's pretty much the same ordinance, again, amended for the CSS. The detention requirements, meaning the 2 through the 100 years, is the same. The storms are the same, and it's largely the same. If there's no questions, I'll make the revisions we talked about and bring it back to you on December for first reading.
Moving on. Consideration to approve or revise the commission meeting date scheduled for the month of December.
Mr. Chairman, you guys just basically need to make a decision. We typically have one meeting in the month of December. Staff does not foresee or anticipate mass items for that agenda, so staff is proposing to cancel the December 2nd meeting and move the December 16th meeting to December 9th.
All right, look at the alternatives. Is alternative number 2 supposed to be to keep the regular?
Yes, to keep.
Any discussion? Motion?
Well, would that work around Commissioner Election's term?
No, yes, no.
It would, okay. I mean, assuming it's going to be.
It's just staff discussed that and everybody feels good, but that's.
Alderman number 1,
Sure.
make a motion to approve alderman number 1, say it.
Motion and a second, which would mean to cancel the 2 meetings and make one on December 9th. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. All right, next item, consideration to appoint a representative to the District 2 seat on the planning board.
Yes, sir. The planning board currently consists of an 8-member board, and there's also an appointed representative of the commissioners who acts as a liaison. The term is for a 4-year term. The commissioner district 2 has expired some time ago. We have advertised and seek representation. We received 1 applicant from Mr. Alan Zipper. It has been advertised in the paper, and I do believe that Commissioner Jones is recommending appointment of Mr. Zipper to District 2.
Any motion?
Make a motion that we go with alternative number 1, appoint Alan Zipper to the District 2 Planning Board.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
No.
Any opposed? So carried.
Before we move on, Mr. Chairman, staff has had discussions about reorganizing the board, the planning board, just allowing for the 5 members among the board rather than 8 members.
And the question is?
And the question is?
And we can certainly discuss this at length later. I thought it may be prudent to bring up at this point in time. Going off of what Ms. Johnson just said, this was advertised. We typically don't get responses to these advertisements. It's difficult at best to get people that are willing to serve, and the ones that do take as much of an interest as maybe they should. And I would say that probably half of that board was on there when I served on the planning board, and that's been a long, long time ago. So we definitely have some people that have been around a lot, dedicated, but at the same time, it's sometimes good to change things up a little bit and get a fresh perspective. It's my opinion that this board needs to be in place and needs to function. I do think it's a great place for the public to come up and bring up issues that staff even may not have thought of, and it allows enough time between planning board and board of commissioners to address those issues when there are legitimate issues that's brought up. I don't think abolition of the board is the right thing, but what I think may be more beneficial is a reworking of it, so to speak, to go from 8 members to 5. The additional 3 members, and Brett's still here, he can talk to this if it offends them particularly, work for each of the municipalities. But we don't have representation on their boards, and I think sometime back there's at least been discussion, Brett will probably clarify if I'm wrong here, about maybe not doing that in the future. We've also had discussions with Springfield about consolidating board, so there's a possibility there also to do some things. But I feel like if we went from 8 to 5, it's at least 3 less people we have to find. To find 5 people that are interested and qualified and willing to do this. It's a fairly good time in that a good portion of the appointments will be up beginning of next year. And if we do this, I would like to see maybe 5, or maybe not 5, but at least some new people on there, keeping some of the ones that we have that they're willing and wanting to stay, and then beginning a little more training than what we've done in the past with them. We've in the past participated in some Gaza events, which are fine, Georgia Association of Zoning Administrators, but I believe, is George still here? Had found some things where Carl Vinson actually offers some training that's more particular to planning boards and what their function is to do. I believe those will be more beneficial also. So you don't have to decide tonight. It's just something that I feel have been thinking about. I've actually talked with the current chairman of our planning board now, who has been around since I was on there, and I think does a wonderful job of what he does, who had looked at coming off and has expressed at least a willingness to talk if we're looking at doing some revamping of that board. So I think there's some opportunities in the future to do if the board so chooses.
Well, typically, if we want people, representatives of the county, there's 5, and we have 5. So, that makes sense. And also, one thing you mentioned was with the training, that we could train them better if it's more manageable on the expense of training 5 people versus 8 and things like that. So, I don't see a problem with it.
And Brett had run up here and kicked me yet, so I don't know if it's too bad to get off our representations from the city's municipalities. So he's good with it. See, we're moving on, voting now. Got the thumbs up.
How was it created? Was it created by some ordinance or whatever that we would have to actually go back and correct?
Yes, it would have to be amended because it specifically sets out planning board, the numbers, the terms, all of that would have to be amended. That's correct.
But not by local legislation, by local ordinance.
Correct.
Far as I'm concerned, redraw the ordinance and present it to this board in December, we'll take action on it.
Maybe January, but we'll get to post haste.
There you go.
Yes, sir.
But understanding if it's the 3 city positions that we're have a conversation. I mean, I know one's represented here, but
I understand. Yes.
Be sure both of the others are on board with it.
Absolutely.
I think they'll have understanding, considering just like as you said, we don't representatives on their boards. I think they'll have understanding of that.
More than anything, it's just difficult to find 8 people to do it, so 5 will be easier. And there's decorum issues and all those things, but I still think we're okay because I believe we get enough participation with a 5-person board that we can still focus.
We're talking about being fair and equitable about things. It creates, you may have, say, the Rankin representative is in District 2, and then I have District 2 appointees. So now you got 2 people that live in District 2. So, that's a problem. And that, when you think of that.
Okay, so we'll go forward with that and bring it back before that.
All right. Next item, consideration to approve a purchase and sale contract for approximately 76.89 acres of land and authorize the chairman to execute the closing documents.
Mr. Chairman, I got to step down from this. I have a immediate family member on the property.
So noted. Still have 4. We still have 4 to execute.
Mr. Chairman, this is one of the things that came out of the master plan, the recreation master plan that recently been completed by CHA, the consultant hired by the county to take a 10-year look and somewhat analyze our facilities. One of the things we looked at in particular was the facility on State Route 199, as Commissioner Oakley pointed out earlier, State Route 119. And what we found is that it's, number one, inadequate for our current needs, in particular for our future needs. So that leaves us in need of a new home for a recreational facility. With that, there were some investigations done to pieces of property that were, one, large enough to hold recreation, two, that were available and had water, sewer, transportation access readily available to the property. There was one that was identified by the board that's right here on State Route 21 as all the above, water, sewer, and infrastructure adjacent to that. And one of the things when you get into facts and findings, we do these staff reports out ahead of these meetings, so it was based on the information available at the time. I've since gotten some of the pieces of information that I had asked or had recommended that the board hold up on this until we got it. And I'll share those with y'all. I believe you actually have copies of it up there. Stephanie's looking at me funny, so you probably don't. So, but basically there were two things that came up. One was a wetland survey for the particular piece of property, and we were unclear at the time as to exactly how much wetlands may or may not be available on that property. And again, since then we have gotten it. This is the sketch that came back from the consultant hired to do the delineation. It's not been verified by the board at this point, but we don't have any reason to doubt the consultant. This is what they do for a living. And as you can see, it's actually less than what we had shown on the master plan that we gave to y'all previously, which showed a wetland line coming more through this area and another one being located over here. This one was not on it, but it works in fairly well with the ball fields. I think we can work around it. Worst case, there will be a slight amount of mitigation that's over here, but that is no longer a concern of mine. There are definitely less wetlands than the sketch, which happily showed all facilities fitting on the property. The second issue that I had in the staff report was there was some talk of the IDA having availability of property on the research forest tract and a little ambiguity as to whether or not it was available. In a prior conversation with Mr. Henry, I don't know if I misunderstood what he said or something changed along the line, but he did reiterate to us via email that the property is somewhat immediately available and that they will be willing to work through the cost of that. Nothing's been to their board. We don't know what that means yet. Somewhat
immediately available, is that what you just said?
Well, it does say immediately available. I would think that means immediately available. Previously we thought that there were some prospects looking at it, they may want to hold off. Again, that may have been my misunderstanding, I'm not sure. That is what I previously said to y'all.
Well, that's where my statement came from.
And what he indicated in his email was that it would be immediately available, so may have been a misunderstanding between what he said to me previously. But at any rate, some of the differences in it, and I have not made it to this level, we can do it if the board so chooses. This is a clear piece of property. There's a value that it's probably $3,500 an acre on 700 acres. 76 is $150,000 to $200,000 worth of value. The clearing that would have to happen on that land. There's no immediate access to it. It's located behind the school. Some 1,000, 1,500 feet of road that would have to be built just to get to the property. And then it's, depending on how you wanted to do it, you could build a road just to this property. It's also adjacent to what has been shown on master plans as the east-west corridor, which doesn't connect the parkway that doesn't exist or the connection to Rincon that doesn't currently exist. So would you want to build that piece of infrastructure now, which would be a much more expensive endeavor than the access? Again, I don't have a total number here, but I think I could easily say between the $200,000 for clearing, the $200,000 to $300,000 road, you're at least $500,000 to get to where this property currently sits. So a free piece of property isn't necessarily free.
If it's free.
If it's free, and again, that hasn't been completely vetted by the board either. He did indicate, Mr. Henry, in his email that he thought we could get it at lower or little cost. So again, we can further explore that. And even at that, there's still a locational issue here to where this property is located more central to the county. The other one's a little more located south. What we finally got to, and I don't have hard numbers on this, is we tried to take the stuff Clarence had in hard copy format as far as the participants, put that in a digital format where we could vet. We got most of the way there. There's some thousands of people that you have, the participants, we keyed all that in. And the last tally that we had was it appeared about 20% of the participants came from a 31326 area code. We didn't drill down into individual addresses, but so 80% of our participants are coming from Guyton or Springfield area codes, one of the two.
We still also have to run water and sewer to it.
Sewer is, water's available. There's a 16-inch water line that runs the length of the school stubbed out on this property. Sewer, there's a pump station on the property, so it's not, it's fairly comparable to this. This one has a 16-inch or a large diameter water main in the route of 21, and it also has a sewer force main. You have to build a pump station on either.
I just think bottom line, when we get down to it, the purchase price of this land is comparable to what we have to pay just to improve the other land, not knowing whether or not. And I did go and attend the last IDA meeting in the hopes, or I thought that they were actually seriously considering having us evaluate it, that they were going to discuss it in their meeting, but it was not on their agenda. So.
And I'll have to say that's probably because of the timing. I know Mr. Henry was off with a holiday. He was off Monday and Tuesday. I had to meet with him that same morning and talk to him. So they probably didn't, by the time I asked the question, I started with him on Friday, but I didn't tell him exactly what I wanted because he was out of town. So that may be why I wasn't.
I had asked to clarify and they had emails on that, but
I am aware now, as I was then and have been, because of other meetings with the city of Rankin trying to annex that piece of property for recreational purposes, that land may or may not be available, but it does show on their master plan as recreational land. Notwithstanding that, I still will stand behind my statement that I believe that this property is located in a much better place and is a lot better value by the time you consider the amount of wetlands that's in that piece of property, the clearing, as you stated, putting in the road, and the infrastructure. I still say that the contract that's before this board for consideration is for the purchase of a 5-acre tract and a 71.89 or something like that. The 2 tracts of land that the Bank of Newington now owns, that was formerly the land of Nidlander, between here and Rankin. We've done our due diligence. The wetlands is, how many acres? Did they give you an acre?
It's not surveyed. He simply provides a sketch that we can go out and locate it by. And I didn't do it as staff because if we need a jurisdictional determination to be done by a surveyor, we may not. But either way, me or RC will get out and get a survey.
I think that we have done the proper due diligence to be sure that the land is usable. The land has a natural fall to that wetlands, which makes it very good to use for what we want to use it for. We've had 2 meetings with recreational board. It is my understanding, and there's people from the rec board here this evening, if anybody disagrees with this statement, please correct me, that the rec board feels that this is the best location and the proper location to invest our funds into to make a good recreational field. That nobody's correcting me. Okay? So the contract price, this property is currently and has been on the market, both tracts of land, for somewhere around $1,700,000. Due to some discussion of this board before, I approached the Bank of Newington. The Bank of Newington has agreed to accept $900,000 for the sale of this property, with the condition that we cut out 1 acre for them to possibly use for a branch or an ATM location. So we would be acquiring 75.89 acres for the sum of $900,000. We have done our title and environmental review. We have done everything I believe that this county needs to do consider allowing me to execute this contract and move forward on behalf of the Recreation Board.
You ready for a motion?
I am.
Make a motion to approve alternate number 1, approve the purchase and sale contract.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried by a vote of 3, which is my rule. We are fixing to buy you a piece of property. Now, what was not on our agenda is the other part of the recreation workshop that I thought was going to be presented to this board, and whether or not just agree to expend those funds that was outlined.
No, sir, we're still trying to get a meeting together with CHA and Clarence, and we just, honestly, what Adam told them was get back this vote right here, and then we'll get together.
Well, because I thought that we really needed to do this, but I think I made a commitment to the rec board that night that I was going to ask this board for consideration and vote. But I think some of those items we can't do with splash collar, and some is going to have to be done. So I just don't want the rec board to feel like we're still pushing it down the road. Do y'all still feel good?
You know, this is not pushing it down the road.
All right. Everybody good? All right. That's the last item of business. We, I think, need a short executive session, if I may have a motion for such.
Make a motion to go into executive session under discuss personnel topics and things to do.
I'll second that.
Motion second. All in favor? Nothing opposed, we stand so carried. All right. Before you get started there, Toss, can we go ahead and approve the November 4th, 2014 executive session minutes?
Make a motion to approve the November 4th.
Second. We have a motion. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Boy, I forgot that, because I would. All right, that's all business except for staff reports. Mr. Allen?
I'll be extremely brief. You have a couple of reports in there, monthly senior citizens reports, monthly fire and senior citizens monthly reports. CRC sidebar conference is actually this Friday. Yeah, the 21st at the CRC in Darien. Didn't know if any of y'all wanted to go to it. Want to make sure you're aware there is a agenda, I guess, for lack of a better word, in your package. It actually seems like it's pretty good stuff. Talking about economic development authorities, which is kind of well timed right now. Sharing what we've been talking about, Phil. Ethics, liabilities, conflict of interest, open meetings, open records. So it's again this Friday, 7:30 to 4:30 in Darien at the CRC office. If anybody's interested in going.
And to add to what Tossa said, John Henry sent an email about it. He said if anybody's interested, you guys can go with him. There's no cost associated with it, but it is limited seating, so.
That's
you
this
need to
Friday.
know.
This Friday, 21st. We just got notice this week. I don't know how we
We
did
got it
it.
Monday.
Monday.
From 7:30 in the morning to 4:30.
Correct. It's a whole day thing. There's several speakers in there. Again, the information's in, and we can go about it more if you're interested, but it actually looks like it may be a pretty good session. The next thing I saw there, y'all have already been made aware of that in the presentation on the millage thing. There's a group that's contacted Adam it's a teacher, and I don't even remember what school it was, but she has a group of 4th graders, and they're going over to tour the old jail museum over here, and because of the limited occupancy of that facility, they really more than anything, they need something to do while they break them into groups. So they were asking if they could come in and tour the historic courthouse. And Adam's response was, I don't think that's an issue, but he needs permission from y'all to do so. This will be on February 11th, yes, sir. And 2 groups, one at 9, one at 10, so they're about 45 minutes apiece, just 4th graders.
That's a public building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's no objection. We'll tell them that's fine. They can go through and do that. we may have to be a tour guide, I think is what, what may end up happening, we may have to dedicate some staff time to tour them through there.
Get out a little flags.
Exit issues is December the 4th. We've been talking about that at the College and Career Academy at 7:30 a.m. Got an email just before I came here. They're really trying to figure out who's coming, so. Exit issues, there's no agenda.
I responded.
You did. What's the date?
December the 4th, Thursday, it's a Thursday.
Gosh, isn't it like at 7 o'clock in the morning?
7:30.
There you go.
You got breakfast. They'll feed you.
You'll be there?
The
Yeah,
culinary students are preparing breakfast.
Orange? Are you going? You coming? Okay.
What is the date?
Thursday, December 4th.
today, but I'll be in Athens.
Okay.
Oh, that's right.
It's the same thing to do with the legislators. I submitted a question for transportational funding, the same one, in light of decreasing and finishing federal funding, what do you want to do? We are going to hold another public information open house on December the 11th, 6 o'clock p.m. in this building for Courthouse Road Extension. This is a follow-up to the previous one that we had. We've done our best to address all the concerns that were expressed in that previous meeting. We want to unveil our plans here. We've reduced the right-of-way through the populated section or the smaller lot section, and hope to, after this one, go ahead and release the engineer to do full-blown plans and start acquiring right-of-way. So if any of y'all are available December 11th, 6 p.m.
The right-of-way from what to what?
From Midland to 17.
Yeah, but you said you decreased the.
Oh, from Midland to, it's Midland Pines and Palmetto, I think is the other road that crosses there. We decreased it from 80 foot and went to 60. We had to add some piping and stuff to do it, but it was interfering with some of those people's yards who were closer to the roads.
60 feet would be adequate for that.
It is. We just had to add some drainage infrastructure to do it. And then I had the swearing in ceremony, and I was told I'm incorrect on that, so please disregard anything I had on that. And that's all I
Judge
have.
Mosley has not received the documentation from the Secretary of State as she had hoped, so they're telling her it's going to be mid-December before they get it back to her.
Oh, so you're not going to be sworn in
No,
next week? Okay.
looks like December 29th.
When are you going to, when are you in Athens?
First week in December.
First week of December or January?
December.
December, okay.
Anything else? No commissioners?
Good.
Everybody good? Give me that motion.
Made a motion to adjourn.
Second. All